anybody from Wolverhampton who's standing in for Phil Bateman. Phil's got as I understand it, a regular hospital kind of or medical appointment. There's nothing special about this now. For those of you who remember the problems he had earlier in the year. And I'd like to welcome Kate Charlton from the legal department, who is standing in today for a colleague who not there. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies also received from Councillor Mackey and Councillor Scott. And we have Councillor Lloyd joining us on Teams today.
Hello, Gavin. Declarations of interest. Well, I have one, very unusual, as a result of a presentation including St Basil's, I think it was 3 years ago. I've given £1,000 to St Basil's for 2 years running. And I think it is important people know that, just in case you think I'm acting with undue favour to St Basil's, which I will be.
Not like modest.
Remarks. At the end of this meeting, we'll be looking at the work programme, and that will include some recommendations going further forward. I attend the board meeting on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee. The Mayor has asked me to pass on his thanks for the work that we've all done, and I think he genuinely means it. And I think he's found it helpful, the comments that we've actually made. At the last meeting, I asked for the second time a question along the lines of, are we actually measuring whether people are getting into jobs as a result of our vocational training? Not all of our training is. I was told unequivocally we are now, which was not what we were told earlier. And my recommendation is that we pick this up, not we, because I won't be here, but this is picked up as part of the work programme to start measuring the outputs of that later in the year. If they now are doing it, I think that would be really good news, and we can start working on that. Minutes of the last meeting. Is everybody comfortable? I can see nods from councillors, so we'll take those as approved. Lindsay, the cracker, which we seem to be on target for.
Yes, Chair. So those items shaded in grey have been completed, and those that aren't are still outstanding, but will be picked up during the fourth of the year. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
No questions? I don't have any questions either. I think, thank you, Lindsay, for your work on progressing this. We have an annual review letter from the local government ombudsman, who should look at any complaints that have reached that level. There haven't been any. No. And therefore, it's an incredibly short report. Has anybody got any questions on the no response? No. So that's done. And now if we can move on to the first substantive item, and we have Rob on screen. Hello, Rob.
Morning, Chair.
And you'll be taking us through this item, Rob?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and apologies for not being there in person. So this is the report that we talked about at the start of the year around the challenges and barriers to housing delivery in the region and what progress has been made against them. I've got some slides to share on the screen, if that's okay with you all, to talk you through, if you can see them in the room. So I'll just load those up. This is the dreaded part of the session where you're not sure whether your screen is actually sharing or not. Hopefully it is sharing on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so this is regarding the systemic barriers to housing and regeneration across the West Midlands. And as I mentioned, we've had a number of sessions and reports on housing delivery and some of the barriers and some of the challenges we've faced over the years that have come to this committee, and we've been through a number of the challenges specifically around affordable housing in particular. This report and the paper sets out the kind of general position for housing delivery as a whole across the region and some of the issues that we are trying to tackle. On the screen now, we've got a list of some of the probably well-known and well-rehearsed issues and barriers which have affected housing delivery over the years, specifically really around the land within the West Midlands and how straightforward or not it is to develop upon. So it's well known there's a considerable amount of what's known as brownfield land, post-industrial land within the region, which is both expensive and complicated to build on for a number of reasons. And whilst there's an abundance of this type of land, it is difficult to bring it forward. And one of the main areas of focus for the Combined Authorities housing team over the last 8 or so years has been very much how do we help address those viability issues for brownfield land in particular. As it mentions on the screen there, high costs, particularly around viability, around making the land clean and available for development. There's usually also things around access and plugging the relevant schemes into both transport network and other areas of connectivity. There's quite an issue as well within the region around land assembly, so quite a lot of fractured land ownership where there's small parcels of land owned by lots of different ownerships, and bringing those together in a coherent way to develop cohesive and genuine communities is a difficulty and something that we've been working on over a number of years. One of the kind of flip sides to brownfield development is larger house builders generally tend to be more focused on higher volume, less risk schemes, which generally tend to be greenfield, if not green belt, and therefore the larger developers, the big national developers, generally tend not to look at brownfield sites, particularly smaller brownfield sites. And one of the things we've been very keen to work on in the last 12 months is how do we work with small and medium-sized, particularly regional businesses, builders and small house builders who might want to access this availability in more depth in future, but find the costs and the kind of being priced out of the market one of the biggest difficulties. So in the new financial work stream that we've got coming online in 2 days' time, in the 1st of April, and we have within the new integrated settlement funding a specific proposal to develop an acceleration fund for small and medium-sized builders within that funding settlement, which is a real step forward for us on that. And then a couple of other things just to mention. So notwithstanding the largely brownfield nature of the work that we do, there are also clearly rural and small sites within the region that are equally difficult to bring forward. We talk a lot to particularly non-constituent council members around some of their more rural areas and how they find that difficult to provide the types of homes that will keep people in the area. And again, that link to affordability of homes, particularly for younger people who are looking to stay in the area where they've grown up, but that they can't afford to get onto either the housing ladder or the rental ladder in terms of local availability. And that really figures across the whole of the tenure mix problem as well. So the problem around how do we address affordability in its widest sense and provide the types of homes that are genuinely needed in the region, so that we're not just providing, and forgive me for being very broad brush here, but we're not just providing thousands of one-bedroom flats that don't address either the family needs or the connectivity needs or the demographic needs of our local residents and people wishing to move here. So those are some of the bigger barriers that we've faced. Within the paper, we've set out a few examples of some of the work streams and activities that we've been progressing and looking to progress even further, and there's some case studies in there. I'll touch on a couple of those here, but also I've got a few other examples to add a bit more depth to the paper itself. Those we've got on the screen there, there's particularly around targeted investment against brownfield sites, which we've just been talking about, and within the paper there's an example of Lockside and Walsall, which is a development that Lovell and WHG have brought forward. That's very complex ground situation, mine shafts, remediation requirements, various other things in the ground, but also the fact that it's bordered on one side by the canal, which restricts access and makes some of the levelling difficult. It's next to other adjacent buildings, so how do you get the work on site completed without disrupting local neighbourhood as well? So various things like that, which are brought about by our funding and helped by our funding. Place-based approaches we've mentioned in the paper around Smithgate in Wolverhampton, which we funded in the last 12 months. This is a placemaking scheme in Wolverhampton in the city centre that's very much looking to do something different in the city centre of Wolverhampton. So bringing forward city centre living in a very kind of advanced and modern way that requires a considerable amount of subsidy, which we've managed to secure through the integrated settlement. And that's a real attempt to show not just housing numbers, but actual development of different public realm and different community benefits within the city centre. Everything we do is through partnership and collaboration. So as members will know, the Combined Authority doesn't build the homes itself and doesn't own the homes once they are built. So everything we do is in partnership with local authorities, Homes England, and the developers and registered providers appropriate as well. So everything we do is based on that basis, and very much dependent on us being able to find the relevant solution or way of taking something forward in a different way. We've also looked in the last 12 months to develop a revenue support programme. So this has been to help local authorities bring forward schemes that are some years away from actual development, where in previous years we've only had capital funding for actual scheme delivery. We've managed to convert some of the funding through the integrated settlement for more revenue support to develop master planning and other types of upfront development work that will then help schemes come forward in due course. I've mentioned the SME support as we were just talking about on the previous slide. We also work very closely with the industry and the wider sector. The Homes Task Force, established about 12 months ago, has been a big factor in that, and also working with Jean and Neelam and other colleagues into the Homelessness Task Force to make sure that we understand all of the region's needs and all of the things that we might be able to do to help. And then final mention on this slide around spatial planning. So as members will know, the spatial development strategy is being developed currently and due to be implemented from 2028 onwards. This is a sub-regional plan above local plans. It doesn't look to replace local plans, which very much stay within local authority control, but it's kind of a more systematic and coherent attempt to bring a kind of coherent regional view over what's being developed and where the best opportunities are in the region, and that will provide us with at least a consistent view of what the housing needs might be in the region, and then how do we address those in future. So I mentioned a couple of case studies outside of those in the report, and this is just to try and show a bit more of the kind of breadth of the work that we've been successful in providing in recent times. So on screen is the Dixon site in Wolverhampton. This is next to the old Royal Hospital, which has also been converted now into affordable living homes with WHG. The site next door to that former Dixon's building is now being converted and extended to provide more YMCA specialist accommodation for young people in their first work employment or their first opportunities from leaving home. That's also then next to on the left hand side of the screen some mixed tenure WHG homes as well. So what we're providing here and helping to deliver is we've provided grant funding into the Dixon's building for its conversion and its extension. That will provide more younger people's homes alongside older living and alongside mixed tenure homes, which is really providing a whole new community within Wolverhampton. And whilst our element is a small part of that, it is part of this much wider regeneration of that place and is a real success story as far as we're concerned. Yardley Brook, another example of a scheme, this one in Birmingham, where there's been a number of attempts to regenerate this former sewage site over the years. Midland Heart, the registered provider, are now delivering 100% affordable homes on this scheme, so just under 300 homes. and the Combined Authority alongside Homes England have provided grant funding to make that scheme come forward. Again, a difficult brownfield site which has been unlocked. And then, and I'm sure Jean and Neelam will be talking more about live and work, so I won't talk too much here about stepping stone, but we are looking to help support more stepping stone accommodation, which is specific supportive accommodation for young people at the moment, but might broaden out into other cohorts in future, where we where we help support reduced rents for young people in a transitional basis so that they can afford to stay in work and rent their own accommodation. And then final example, and one that has taken a long time to get to, but we're very proud that it's made it this far now. So we've now got investment approval for phase 1 of the Spon End estate regeneration. So members of this committee have probably heard me talk about this for a long time. This is the regeneration of the existing Spon End estate in Coventry on the edge of the city centre. We have put some brownfield funding in alongside Homes England grant, which will fund the affordable homes on this regeneration. There's been a lot of back and forth over the years about whether the homes could be counted as new, because we are measured by government on new homes rather than replacing existing homes. However, we have managed to negotiate with government that this scheme is effectively replacing moribund, not fit for purpose homes in phase 1, and it will deliver huge wider benefits for that part of Coventry, and it's something we'll be looking to support in other parts of the region as well in future. So just finally from me, Chair, but of course after this happy to talk through and answer questions. Just some of the remaining challenges. I think it's clear the scale of funding required isn't reducing, in fact it's increasing. Building costs, the labour market, all of the geopolitical events of the last few months are all having an effect on how much it costs to actually deliver housing, both in the region and wider. And whilst the integrated settlement does provide us with 4 years of funding, it's fair to say that we could spend that at least twice over, if not more, in the next 4 years if we had the additional funding. So there is still a need for more funding to come into this work for us. I mentioned at the start around the land market itself, so availability of developable sites and being able to make those sites come forward in terms of being able to assemble the land, being able to parcel different or bring together different parcels of land to make sites more coherent and more strategic is still a challenge for us, and something that we are keen to try and work through, both with the planning system through CPO, but also how do we kind of bring forward and bring together partnerships to bring those land parcels together. Securing public support, I think, is really important, particularly around when I've just mentioned Spon End estate regeneration. Estate regeneration can be a very emotive subject, and obviously we're talking about people's lives where people have grown up. It's important that that process doesn't look like it's being done to people, but the communities are involved and co-design that delivery. That's very much been the case at Spon End with phase 1 with citizen housing, and that's very much something we'd like to continue with our work in that area. And then just to conclude, really, the securing the mixed tenure development that we need for local needs. So through the new programme, through our funding, but also through the new social and affordable homes programme, which again starts this week through Homes England, there is a big focus on social rent. Again, has been a tenure of choice, and we all collectively support that as a region. But it's important to note that there are different parts of the market, and we do need to make sure that those first-time buyers or people who are looking to go into shared ownership or different types of accommodation are included in what we try to bring forward in the region, and making sure that we do genuinely meet those various needs across the region. So those are our, I mean, there's more challenges than that, but they're probably the 4 biggest that I would suggest that are kind of overseeing everything that we'll be taking forward in the new integrated settlement funding, and then beyond that after those 4 years. So I'll stop sharing my screen there, Chair, and come back to you for questions and further thoughts.
Thank you, Rob. I just want to check, are you staying for the next agenda item as well?
I am, Chair, yes. Yes,
because I think there's a link between the two.
absolutely.
Save
Yeah,
me asking
absolutely.
the questions next. Secondly, I'd like to thank you for getting a handle on the numbers. 3 years ago, I don't think we would have been able to express the needs where we are exactly. So I think it is well done, because without the numbers, you can never manage it. So well done on that. And I've got a question of clarification, which I think members might actually find helpful. In paragraph 2.11, you talk about 12,000 plus homes being unlocked and 8,500 already contracted. Could you just explain the difference between those two figures?
Yes, Chair, I can. So what we are kind of measured by government on is when we go into contract with the developer or the local council, whoever's receiving the funding. So when we go into legally binding contract with those developers or with the other partners, that's effectively what we call contracted homes. So obviously it will then take some time for those homes to be developed, but that's what we are measured on by government, is the contract being legally enforced. In terms of unlocking the homes, those can be, or those will include the schemes where we've got investment approval, either through investment board or delegated sign-off, but they're still in the legal contracting process after that. So they haven't reached legal agreement, but they have been approved through investment board or other combined authority means.
So we've got 12,000 where we are happy to give money on, and 8,500 where we're legally bound to do it, and they're legally bound to build them.
That's right, Chair.
That's right, yeah. Thank you for that. Members, questions?
If I can, Chair, kick off. On the same paragraph, actually, 34% of the approved homes are projected to be affordable 10 years. Whenever we're discussing housing, and then this goes for our local authority as well, there's always talk about affordable. What's your definition of affordable?
Okay.
Affordable to whom?
Yeah, well, that's the number for the question, Councillor, and it's been something that we've worked on with colleagues for quite some time in the region. So, affordable 10 years as agreed through government and through the National Planning Policy Framework are social rent, which is roughly 50 to 60% of market rent levels, and that's the most affordable, or the cheapest, if you like, type of rented home that's available. Then there's what's called affordable rent, which is 80%, capped at 80% of market rent, so not as affordable as social rent, but still lower than market rent. Then there's what are called intermediate or other products, so that might be things like key worker housing or other types of specific cohort aimed at specific cohorts. There's shared ownership, which is where the tenant purchases a percentage of the house, or the home, sorry, I should say, and then rents the remainder. So they can either staircase up and build a higher percentage of the ownership of the home that they own, or they can continue at that level of rent over the years. And then there's particular types of specialist and supported accommodation around things like either catering for specialist needs or different types of support for particular cohorts in society. What we have done in the past, and what's probably worth me doing, and apologies, we probably should have appended it to this report, is send the definition around that sets those things out, because it is quite a complex area, and it's something that we do discuss frequently. So if it's helpful, Chair, I'll send those around straight after the meeting.
I think that would be helpful, Chair. And then thanks for that explanation, Rob. So that 34% includes all those types that you've just gone through. Yeah, okay.
It does. It does, so yeah.
Thank you for that. And I'll clarify my understanding. So in Wolverhampton, you'd have one version of affordable housing, one amount of affordable housing, because the market rents would be different potentially than, say, Sandwell. So this is local housing areas, is it?
Generally speaking, Chair, yes. So the local rent will be defined through the planning process and through the local market. So certainly on affordable rent, it will be 80% of what is the current market rent at that time, or with inflation in due course. Excuse me. Social rent will be around the local housing allowance and how that is based through the local plan as well.
That's helpful. Thank you. Councillor Quinnan.
Right. Thank you, Chair. My question is on the cost control. Given high remediation and construction costs that you have just mentioned, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that the building works are not hindered, and as well as the works are done within like try to catch up with the prices, like the developers work faster in order to fund these homes within the budget that has been originally given. So have you got anything in that? And if you have thoughts on that, or what are they? What are the timescales, for example, in order to prevent that to prevent developers coming back and saying, "Can we have more money because we've run short?" Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And it's a very good question, because it has been a considerable issue over recent years, in particular with cost inflation, where original approvals for schemes have then come back to us for additional money when the costs have increased further down the line. What we do through our approvals process, is we set a maximum figure for the grant that we will provide for a scheme. That's assessed through both our internal team, and we also get independent assessment from external valuers and surveyors to ensure that that is within the bounds of, we're not being basically overcharged, or there's not more grant going into a scheme than is required. Once that's approved and goes into contract, the contract enforces how that money is paid and when it's paid, and what proof we require for the money to be drawn down. So generally speaking, our funding doesn't get drawn down until completion of the site. So basically, we can't put money into a scheme and then nothing ever happens with it. We put it in upon completion, and that has to go through a rigorous diligence process as well, to be able to prove that the funding gap was there, the viability gap was there, and our funding was required to address that. And it's not our funding that's then providing profit for the developer. It's very much, how do we ensure that those gaps are met, and that's all done through the legal process that's reported back to our team, and that is managed through the audit process as well. So there are guidelines, and there are fail safes in place to make sure that we don't either get overcharged by developers, or that they don't just end up not delivering anything, because effectively, if they don't deliver, they don't get our funding at completion.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other councillors? Rob, sorry, Councillor Ward.
Sorry, yes, right. The figures on when they build an housing estate, it was 20% social, and the rest could be buy-to-lets and for sale. Is it still 20%, or has there increased now the amount of social they can actually build on an estate? Because it's not mixed tenure on a lot of these estates. You've got social, buy-to-lets, and for sale.
Yes, Councillor. So the individual mix on each estate will be subject to the agreement with the planning authority. So local plans will have different targets within them, depending on which local authority, of how much overall percentage of affordable in general they would like to see, and then within that the breakdown of the different types of tenures, social rent, shared ownership, etc. Generally speaking, I haven't got the exact numbers, but generally speaking, I think across the board regionally there's around, it varies in different local authorities, but there's around a 30% average. Then depending on whether that's agreed through the planning process, there can be additional affordable homes brought in, which is where the Homes England grant comes in. So anything being delivered on an affordable basis above that which is agreed through planning can be funded by the Affordable Homes Programme through Homes England. And we've seen, as the Yardley Brook example showed, that's 100% affordable because there's grant going into that from Homes England, which makes all of those homes affordable rather than it being the 20 or 30% agreed through planning process. So it differs across different parts of the region, but there is no, if you like, there's no cap. There's nothing to say it has to be 20%, no more, no less. It can vary on site to site basis.
Yeah.
Could I just add, Chair? I think it's unfortunate in some ways, but we will have our end of year figures. Well, probably not tomorrow because it'll be down to the wire last minute tomorrow to get the final contracting done. But within the next week or so, we'll have the kind of end of year figures. And I think it's fair to say, and this is not me at all, this is the development team, have had an incredible year where we're looking to have contracted over 6,000 homes, which is roughly 5 times the highest we've ever done before. So it's been an incredible year of us getting a huge number of schemes through the process and getting the funding contracted. Once we've got those figures, and obviously they'll be going to Investment Board and Combined Authority Board, we'll make sure that Scrutiny Committee receives those as well, because I think it's just it's important for us to note that it's been such a significant shift in the last 12 months to that level of delivery.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good question on credible developers. I understand we have a good contact with the big builders in the area. So when it comes to the small builders, which have a reputable track of building homes in the West Midlands, but they have not reached the higher numbers, are we still in position to engage those builders compared to the big builders?
Sorry, I missed the middle bit of the question, but was it, are we talking to the small and medium?
Yeah, small and medium.
Yeah. We are, and we do quite a bit of outreach to all parts of the sector, Councillor. What that new programme or new element of the programme that I mentioned, which starts in a couple of days, will do is do some proper market research and outreach to the whole of the kind of broad range of small and medium builders across the region, so that we understand where they are in the market, what they're looking to do, what ambitions they might have to deliver more if they had more access to different types of funding or different types of opportunities. So we are open and have an open door to all types of developers, and that continues, but we are making a specific kind of market outreach process in the next 6 months once the new funding kicks in a couple of days' time to really understand that market a bit better. And we've brought in a particular individual who's working on that basis for us as well, to try and make sure that we assess and try and bring in as many of those opportunities into our pipeline as we can.
Thank you.
I've got a kind of follow-on question from that. In a year's time, i.e. this meeting in a year's time, would you be able to come back and explain what you've done, what the success is, and therefore what the plans are going forward? Small sites may not add thousands of houses, but they certainly reduce blight.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can meet niche needs quite well. So I think we did make this recommendation that you had a look at this about 18 months ago, and I'm extremely pleased to see that it's picking up. Is March next year, would that be a reasonable time to review this?
I think that's perfectly reasonable, Chair, and I look forward to, if I'm still around, to be able to come and tell you how well it's gone.
So thank you for that. Has any further thought been given to the Combined Authority getting compulsory purchase powers to try and overcome these site assemblage issues, particularly where we've got sites that are held to hostage by a particular landowner? I know local authorities have got them, but some local authorities are very reluctant to use them, particularly if it's not their own scheme. Has consideration been given to that, and are we lobbying the government so the combined authority could perhaps get those powers in order to unlock brownfield sites in particular, not general greenfield sites, but brownfield sites?
Yes, Chair, we do actually have compulsory purchase order powers at the combined authority, but we've never used them for housing purposes. We have used them for transport and various other, well, mainly transport schemes. Again, similar to some local authorities, I think there's always been a kind of, not a reluctance, but how is this best done, and it to be seen as, you know, a democratic way forward. Generally speaking, local authorities have been keener to lead on the CPOs where they've happened themselves, and we've looked to support them where possible. Homes England actually have more extensive CPO powers, which means that they can do or bring forward a compulsory purchase order without the final scheme being fully agreed, so that they can do it kind of upfront rather than having worked up the entire scheme in enormous detail. And so we've talked quite extensively with Homes England in recent times about how we might look to do that in certain situations where we know that there's a large area under a number of different ownerships that will be very difficult to bring forward without at least the, I don't want to say threat, but threat's the only word I can think of CPO, which doesn't always necessarily have to follow through, but it just generally does tend to bring landowners more into the tent for negotiation. So we're doing a bit of work through the integrated steering group that we've got with Homes England and local authorities on CPO. I think we've got a workshop in a couple of weeks' time to look at where we might be able to do that, but it is something we're keen to address, noting the Land Assembly challenge that we looked at in the presentation.
I would, if members are supportive, I think we could specifically support that initiative. Yeah,
10%. Agree.
I think that would help. And finally, will the spatial plan, this is going to kind of hop over into the next issue. We talked about homes for young people. Will the spatial plan actually take account of those housing needs for specifically young single people? And I say single because it comes into the next agenda item. And I did hear you say right at the beginning, we're talking about family homes. I am very, very worried about young people and their inability to get on the housing ladder, but inability to actually get into a home of their own at all. And some families do find it difficult to have the young person remaining at home, and they can end up at risk of, if not on the streets, so certainly less desirable places than having their own dog. Within the spatial plan, can you require local authorities to specifically look at this issue? Is that possible?
I would need to check on that, Chair, because I'm not a planner, so I'm not close to quite how that works in terms of the kind of delegations, I suppose. But certainly what the spatial plan, the overall spatial development strategy should be doing is setting the overall picture and framework for what the region is looking to do, and then local authorities address that through their own local plans. So there should be the opportunity to work through with the local authorities, how do we best address these needs? And the needs will be there, in fully kind of work through data and statistics for the region, particularly around these types of demographic issues. Then we can bring that forward and show that this is something that needs to be addressed, and we can build that into the framework of the plan. How that actually works in terms of the spatial development strategy insisting or ensuring that local authorities do things, I'd need to check that, because it's a bit of a grey area as far as I'm concerned.
I think it would actually help. Most of the housing in my borough is going to end up on greenfield sites, which by definition means that they are not within the towns. They tend to be more isolated if you don't have a car. And this is a specific need, I think, for this group. They need to be within the towns, because being stuck out on the 1 bus an hour route is not very helpful. So I think if it's something to encourage, I think that would be helpful. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned at the beginning something about rather than focusing on one bedroom apartments, focusing on other. Now, this actually ties in with this. Now, I know for a fact, social housing, there's quite a few people who live on their own and are actually taking up houses and they're actually taking up flats. They actually could go to small families, the 2-bedroom flats and what have you, houses could actually accommodate, whereas they're actually on their own, because if there's not enough single person social housing properties, you're gonna, that's part of where the block is on actually social housing getting moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and forgive me, I was probably being a bit broad brush when I said that. I totally agree, and the work we're doing with Neelam and colleagues on stepping stone accommodation is really important for this type of approach. And when I said 1-bedroom flats, I wasn't really talking about that area of the market. What I was probably saying, without being too blunt, but I'll be blunt this time, is we've seen in other cities in the UK, and I'm thinking of one in particular that makes a lot of noise about its housing delivery, where they've had a huge amount of 1-bedroom apartment tower blocks built, city centre tower blocks, which are frankly very few people actually living in them, but they've built them and therefore they claim the homes that they've delivered. That's not what we're looking to achieve. So we're not looking to achieve, large, shiny city centre luxury accommodation, which doesn't actually provide any accommodation for the people who need it. What we're looking to do is address the local needs, which single accommodation, as you've just described, does definitely form a part of that.
Thank you, Rob. I'd also like to thank you for the 3 schemes that I know in my borough have been financed. Digby Jones site, the old school site, Mel Square and Kingshurst. And I'm going to do something that Andy Street told me I should never ask a question. The Berkswell Estates are applying for a grant from you for 37 almshouses because they found a pipeline underneath their piece of land. I hope you're going to look on it favourably, industriously, because I am extremely keen, because that is exactly targeted on the groups we've been talking about. And I've stuck my neck out and gotten planning permission on a greenfield site, and I'd hate to see it die because of an oil pipeline's in the way. It needs to be moved. And that site is 4 2-bedroomed houses, and that is, I'm going to call them single parents with the odd child whose marital breakdown came with significant distress. I don't know what you call it these days, and I'm choosing my words carefully, but the rest are for single people. And a lot of those is either single old people, like we've got people living in caravans, or single young people who really do need somewhere stable to live. And this site is very convenient for getting to jobs in Coventry. So if you could look at that with not favour, but industriously, I'd appreciate it. And now you can tell me to stop it.
Noted, Chair. And I will just to add again, just briefly, myself and Neelam have been talking to almshouses as part of our wider work on sort of what are the opportunities out there for more specific, affordable homes for particular cohorts. So again, it fits into that wider piece of work as well.
That's good, because this one is social housing rents as well, not. So very important. Thank you very much. If that's it, I'd like to move on to the specific, please, now about the homelessness task force. You're leading on. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the report that we've shared around really was to give an update regarding the work of the Homelessness Task Force. As members will already know, the Combined Authority doesn't have any statutory duty on homelessness. but it does have that convening role to bring partners together to think about what we can do together. And how we've chosen to do that in the combined authority is to have a homelessness task force that brings our local authority, wider public sector partners and the voluntary sector and business representation to really think through the challenges that we have in our region. So over the last sort of 12 months or so it's more than 12 months since we last reported to Overview and Scrutiny, we've done a whole gambit of work with partners within the WMCA and wider partners outside. And that stemmed all the way across rough sleeping, so that really visible end of rough sleeping. And so at the moment, a lot of the money that comes into the combined authority has been to target that cohort. But we've also looked to the increasing presentations at our local authorities and the rising complexity in terms of young people, families that are basically stuck in temporary accommodation and need homes. So a lot of our work really has been to think through existing work in the combined authority where there are more powers and there are more resources, and looking at how we embed designing out homelessness principles within that, within those work streams. So over the 12 months, we've really prioritised working together with our homes colleagues and also the mayor's task forces on homes and jobs. And what we've really kind of honed down on is that kind of homes for everyone, jobs for everyone, and thinking about the for everyone and what that actually means, and making sure that people, everyone in our region, is included within those work streams. And the reason that we have prioritised kind of our work with those two task forces as opposed to the other two, growth and job growth and transport, is because we actually think that those two work streams, there has to be a weave between them, because it isn't good enough to just have lots of homes over here and lots of jobs over here. But actually working out that the jobs that are available for people don't actually pay people's housing costs. Like at the end of the day, nobody in this region, including ourselves, you don't operate in one system at a time. Nobody does. We operate in many systems, and therefore we have to bring them together. So what that has resulted in is kind of really getting, especially the Homes Task Force, to think through kind of that, moving away from thinking about units and targets around home building, but actually thinking about the people that need to be living in those homes and what those homes are, what they need to look like. So we've had the conversation already about what is it, what do we need? Are we just going to look at the number of units, or actually are we going to think about the types of units or homes that we are building in our region? And we need to have a better kind of focus on that and really looking at local need. For example, like every local authority, you know how many, what households you've got, you know your household makeup in temporary accommodation, and that is what we need to be building so that we can move people out of temporary accommodation and into homes for life. And also, if there is an opportunity for people to work, that they are able, to join the labour market and then be able to afford their home and therefore kind of come out of that benefit trap. So that's been a lot of the work. So in terms of the Homes and Jobs Task Force, we've now got some shared agreed priorities with them. And a lot of that is around looking through in 26, 27, looking through kind of youth homelessness and youth pathways for housing and also for jobs. So we're going to try and support the sort of new task and finish groups that both groups are forming, and trying to kind of basically get them to lean on our expertise in homelessness and really looking at how we can prevent homelessness for young people through those routes. The other thing we have obviously been doing is kind of badgering Bob and his team, and it is badgering around the new social and affordable homes programme, because again, we always have this conversation about, well, affordable for who? But obviously we have that regional prospectus now, and the regional priorities, I think, really do reflect what the point I've been making about, I think, as a combined authority, I think, to be fair, we are moving away from just talking about units and the kinds and the types of homes. So you'll see the 8 regional priorities, they include things like stepping stone accommodation, which we are going to try and cajole lots of RPs to try and take up that mantle. But also, they talk about, larger family homes for people with disabilities and stuff like that, which I think, 7-8 years ago, we probably weren't talking about so clearly. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And then in terms of the kind of rough sleeping space, the numbers have increased over the last year. We've had a 30% increase So we will carry on looking at what we can do in terms of people that are coming out onto the streets and how we can prevent that from happening. So what we're trying to do is not just looking at one cohort, but looking at that kind of life course approach and looking at how do we actually stop people as early as possible from entering homelessness, really, whether they are single young people or whether they are families with children. So that's kind of going to be, that will continue to be our work focus in the next year. So alongside all of the kind of achievements that we put in the report, we've also had the government publish their national strategy, so the National Plan to End Homelessness. We were really lucky that we were offered the opportunity to join the government's expert group in the development of that new plan. And so we were able to really share the work that we've been doing as a region and the way that we bring our partners together. And if you look at that new strategy now, you know, they are talking about homelessness in all of its forms. You know, previous government was only really talking about rough sleeping, so they're talking about homelessness in all its forms. That's what we've been trying to do. And the strategy really sets out prevention as kind of the thing that we as a country all need to focus on. So you'll see the pillars and they kind of resonate and mirror so well with the positive pathway approach that we've been using for the last sort of 9 years. And I can't believe we are saying that it's been 9 years. Alongside that, the strategy is very much more clearer about the role of a combined authority and the role of mayors in the homelessness space. So again, as I say, the statutory duty still remains with local authorities, but it's very clear that they are expecting a stronger convening role and a stronger strategic responsibility for the mayor and the combined authority. And they've set that out in kind of what they are calling 4 functional responsibilities. So that is around mayoral combined authorities, setting that regional ambition, convening partners, working with the voluntary community and faith sectors to strengthen services across the region, and then where appropriate, doing pan-region activity. Now, I would argue to say that we have that homelessness task force and we have been working in exactly those ways for the last 9 years. So for us as a region, I feel like we are probably ahead of the game. We have a good structure. We have good governance around homelessness, that we can take those functional responsibilities to that next step now. I feel like as a region, we are not starting, we're not starting from scratch. You know, we have, I really believe we have a group of people that can kind of help the mayor and combined authority to think through those functional responsibilities and really take that designing out homelessness ambition that we've got to that next stage now. So alongside the strategy, there has been a lot of consolidation of funding. So lots of separate funding streams have been pulled into one homelessness and rough sleeping and domestic abuse grant. And the combined authority will be recipients of that over the next spending review period. I've set out in the report what that is for each year. Just to note, the first 2 years, the formula that they've used, we are kind of receiving funding at a similar level to what we have been doing for the last 5 to 6 years. But just to note that previously we've only really been looking at work in the rough sleeping space for funding that comes in from government, but this time around we'll be using kind of a similar amount of money for the first 2 years to think through not just rough sleeping, but what we can do in the children, families and young people space too. And then in year 3, the funding kind of shoots up a little bit more, so hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more. Within the strategy, there was also mention of a number of new funding programs. One of them was the supported housing funding program. And again, you'll see in the report that we have an allocation against the supporting housing funding program for about £18 million. That is for targeted work in Birmingham and Coventry. So what the government have done is they've set out £152 million nationally, and they used the new homelessness and rough sleeping formula to look at the need across the country. They identified 40 local authorities, and Birmingham and Coventry made that top 40 based on the need that is presenting in those 2 areas. And so we will be now working with Birmingham and Coventry to think through what we can do in that supported accommodation sector and how we can give people better support that have come through homelessness and kind of making sure that they get the right support to come in from the streets or to prevent them from coming onto the streets, and then also making sure that they don't have repeat forms of homelessness. So we're currently working at the plans for that. we will also be holding a small amount of that money back at the Combined Authority to look at what we can do kind of pan-regionally, and then thinking about the new Supported Housing Act that came in 2023, which should be implemented in the next few years, and looking at what we can also do to get the region ready around the new licensing regimes and everything that will come with that. So there is a lot of work to be getting on with. We've done a lot, but there is a lot more to do, and our numbers are reflective of that. So I'm going to pause there and take any questions.
Thank you. Ask. Who councillors would like to talk? So Councillor Waters.
As Kettle.
Yeah. Councillor. So 3 so far. Right, Councillor Waters.
Right. Now, where this the thing, I mean, being on looking at Walsall, one of the issues is now Walsall Council have got a team called Money Home Job, and they actually deal with that if there's any issues with money issues and all sorts of that, as obviously. But what doesn't happen as far as I can see is housing associations do not link in with the council to actually assess to prevent homelessness, to prevent section 26s. I've got the number wrong probably, but 21, yeah. They do not work with the council to actually do that. So they've got this team that can actually help with bills and so forth and so on.
Sure.
But the housing association does not work with them. So you do end with people getting section 21s, but they shouldn't be getting them. And it's probably all over the West Midlands this happens, not just Walsall. So that is something that may try to be worked on, the reason why the housing associations actually give these section 21s to people when it's probably money issues they're having because they've got rent issues or what have you, and they're not paying the rent and they'll evict them because they're not paying the rent and what have you, and these can actually be worked on, and that is the thing.
So what, yeah. So funny enough, one of the things we are doing with Walsall Council and our colleagues is we're looking at early identification of households at risk of homelessness.
Yeah.
So we are doing a project with your colleagues at Walsall to look at using something called lift data. So looking at data where people might be forming rent arrears or council tax arrears or other indicators, and then trying to work with landlords, whether they're private or social, to think through what we can do for that household to keep them in the property rather than them kind of getting into so many arrears that they then get evicted and then come back to local authority presented as homelessness, and then the route follows. So I think in that next set of work, that is what we're trying to do. And one of the conversations I'm having with your colleagues at Walsall Council at the moment is also about how we can maybe work in schools as well and really think through that early identification of households in areas where we know that people are more at risk, and trying to do the work early rather than really late in the day, because that's what tends to happen. Like the indicators with like your housing association, etc. I think sometimes it's too late in the day by the time you realise how much the arrears have built up to. So yeah, absolutely. But that is something we are looking at. So, but it's the work is at early stages because it's trying to work out which data indicators actually are good at recognising families early. But I think part of that is also that relationship, as you say, with the local authority, having that relationship, whether it's a private landlord, whether it's an exempt landlord, or whether it's a supported housing landlord, really working together to put that package of measures in, because it is all about keeping people in rather than because the route to housing should not be to become homeless first, basically.
That's it, yeah. Because it's okay so long as private landlords, housing associations will actually share the data with the I don't know, they're not obligated, but I don't think they are, but they'll actually share the data to actually show Mrs. Smith down the road is in arrears with the rent. She needs some help here.
Yeah.
Instead of just badgering Mrs. Smith to actually get the person some help, and that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree.
Build on that. Within the contracts that we sign, Rob, within the contracts we sign as a combined authority, where they agree to provide a certain amount of affordable housing, and we look at whether we can put some wording in to require the housing associations to work jointly with local authorities to stop
Yes,
on these issues to stop it.
yes,
The clause will never get used, but as you said, this is like compulsory purchase powers.
Yeah.
Sometimes having it encourage it.
yes.
Can we look at whether that's possible? I have
Yes.
no idea whether legally it's possible or not, but
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we might be able to use, so in the national strategy, they also talk about, so obviously at the moment, certain public sector partners have a duty to refer people into local authority, but now there's talk in the plan around having a duty to collaborate. Don't know what that's going to look like, and we've told MHCLG we want to be part of those conversations, but again, it could be part of the duty to collaborate, Rob, that we put something in to say that you have that duty to collaborate with your local authority for families that might be at risk, possibly. Like I say, I don't know what that collaboration duty will look like, but hopefully we'll have a say in what it might look like.
but if we could proactively, government takes years to do. I suspect in a year, between the two of you, you might be able to come up with something. Or you might not be able to, and if you can't, you can't. But I think it might just be worth
exploring. Yeah.
Thank you. You know what? I like practical things to do. Councillor Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we're dealing with humanity at a very fundamental level, and it's an ongoing, very complex problem that we've had for years. And I think, first of all, we've got to identify the genuine harmless. And that's a very important criterion. It's nice to see the rather complex funding and the consistency that's quite, you must admit, you raise your eyebrows. I've tried to pin down how much money we are actually putting into this over, say, a 3-year period. And looking at the figures of last year, and it's very difficult to tie down specifically how much money we're actually putting into this. And recently I tried to help a couple with the suitcases and bedding in the streets in Stourbridge that was causing the nighttime economy a bit of confusion, you might say. And when we had the staff turn out to look at them and try to help them with the police in attendance, they all routed and went back to Cheltenham from Stourbridge. So what I'm getting at is the mobility of the problem we're dealing with. Who would have thought? We have people buzzed into our area. And when we tried to help people a few years ago, 3 out of the 4 that were regulars in Stourbridge High Street went home in taxis.
Yeah.
Only one was actually homeless. So when I go back, I hate to be cynical, you know, but I'm telling the truth, aren't I? And people involved come across this problem every day. And what I would like to see is a clear line in our papers that indicate how much money is being put into the problem, and detailed in the finance section at the back. But we often get, I would like to see a more detailed idea of the financial input we put into this problem. It's not going to go away in 5 minutes. I'd like to see an integrated system where properties, let's say 20 houses, there'd be 4 single occupant properties within the scheme, which would allow, you know, maybe small properties, but small economically viable properties for maybe a single individual. And if we could get this integration more often in our schemes, I think it would be helpful. But my comment is mainly about the consistency, which is inevitable, and we've got to have it. And we need to pin down just how much money is involved. That's my comment.
Jean, did you want to comment?
Is that all right?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course it's all right.
I'm Jean Templeton, I'm independent chair of the Homelessness Task Force. So just wanted to come in there on, not cut across Neelam's brilliant report, but just wanted to comment in on that particular point that you're making. And it kind of links a bit to Councillor Waters' point as well. Because what you have is if you look at the wider context than the national situation, we have got in
the West Midlands, and Neelam mentioned it, we have got a non-commissioned exempt sector who say they are supported housing. They advertise all around the country to say, come to us because we can provide support. They don't provide the support that's required. They often trap people in toxic, awful accommodation, causing problems for local communities, and then they evict them when they get a job because they won't get the money. And I've seen many notices where there's eviction. Now, the problem is that the situation you describe is it then falls back on it's the family or the individuals that get blamed. What's happening is they are being moved around a system that does not work. And Neelam mentioned it was 2023 when the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act was enacted. It is not yet implemented. And we have in Birmingham alone something like 33,000 units of that type of accommodation. Now, they are evicting, and the worry is, and government have the worry, and successive governments have had the worry about implementation, because the reality is Renters' Rights Act, Section 21 will go. So a lot of these landlords, they will not meet licensing standards when Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act comes in. So a lot of these landlords are looking now, what do we do now? Do we evict? Do we get rid? So the reality is, and this is, you know, that collectively, and we're having all these conversations nationally. I'm going to meetings the rest of the day, Birmingham Social Housing Partnership. We're working with the City Council, and we're supported by others in the task force and your officers, everything. Is we need a proper managed transition for this shift through this legislation. We need proper funding for those that meet licensing standards to provide the support that local authorities need for their local populations. Because what it will also mean is that any other authority, any part of the country, housing authorities will have to do supported housing needs analysis, supported housing strategies, licensed providers who will meet those local needs. Okay, that will help so much. But until there is the confidence, shall we say, and the courage, I would add, and I say that as an independent person, Chair, the courage to take this forward, we are going to get that swirling. And the money you're talking about is largely Neelam and her team and the combined authority. Everything that's been brought in financially is additional, and it's been double devolved to make sure that each local authority gets what they need. The real pressure is on each of your individual local authorities in terms of trying to do this, trying to make, you know, Rolls-Royce ambition with mini money, quite frankly. And until collectively we get this move forward, the potential for things are that
We're showing the symptoms of the disease,
a lot,
aren't we?
yeah. And we need, and this is why I love this task force. I'll shut up in a minute, but I love this task force. I've been privileged to be the independent chair for the last 9 years. Cross-sector, cross-region, cross-politics, collectively working together to try and get the best for the people that fall out of all of our systems in the region.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, it'll be brilliant to carry that on and carry that so we don't get all, you know, I'll have a bit of yours, but what's mine's my own sort of stuff. That actually we work together to get the best for those that are, you know, falling out, quite frankly, of many of our systems.
Thank you. Actually, I might add a few. I wasn't actually texting. I was doing a calculation on my. Since from 2000 to 2026, the population has increased by 11 million, or about 19%. We've actually built an awful lot of houses, but the number of houses in the stock has only increased by 17%. Not only that, but the occupancy level of housing seems tiny, has dropped from 2.38 people per home to 2.35. That's 250,000 homes, that drop in occupancy rate. I'm surprised it's not more. And I suspect we've got people living at home who would prefer not to be living at home, because with birth rates at 1.4 rather than the 2.1, of course occupancy rates have dropped. I mean, my very crude figures reckon we're 850,000 homes short, which is, if we're building 262,000 homes, which is what we were over that period, which is actually not bad. We are several years. That is what's driving the problem. It's not people intentionally make themselves homeless. There are no doubt a few of those, but it's the sheer population growth and the housing hasn't kept pace with it.
No, it hasn't.
And the housing need has also changed. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on in here. So that I was trying to convince myself that building on the green belt was a really bad idea. I failed. Anyway, Councillor Upple.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Fantastic, Sean. You supported 6,381 individuals over the 5 years, which is fantastic. But just checking how many actually individuals have retained or secured accommodation for over 2 years.
But we do have the figures in a different report. We will commission projects across the region to look, and we do keep the records, but we won't keep the records forever. So we will have retention rates up to the end of last March. And we do have them, and I can share them, but I don't know them off the top of my head, but we can send them across.
So not a problem. Many questions. Out of those, I'm very pleased to see that 228 gone to employment training or voluntary sector. So is there anything else you can add on from with working with other partners so they can more people get into skills or move on to the ladder so they can have you secured themselves rather than going back to tapping the system again?
So the challenge that we have, Councillor Upple, is that we have very limited funding coming into the Combined Authority to commission these sorts of projects. So what we tend to do with the Homelessness Task Force is we will look with your officers and look at what you are already commissioning through the money that's coming through your local authorities, and then we try and plug either some of the gaps or we try and do some of the testing of different models. So, for example, most of the stuff that you guys will be commissioning will be in the crisis space, trying to get people off the streets through your outreach into accommodation. And what we try and do is kind of come on top of that to look at some of these other things that we could do for people to keep them off the streets once they're in accommodation. So, for example, we'll look at social networks, we'll look at getting people into employment. So we will never do tons of, we will never have the kind of scale of numbers, because a lot of the work that we are trying to do is test what works in your area. And then part of that work is then to look at how we can kind of embed that within the local authority pathway. So, and what we're trying to do in the years to come is, again, really looking at, rather than looking in the crisis space, but looking at what can we either do to prevent people from coming onto the streets in the first place, so keeping them in their home, or on the other side, when they have come through rough sleeping, is looking at what are the things that keep people away from the streets, because we know sometimes people do have tendencies and they still traject back. So what is it? So is it social networks? Is it community? Is it work? So I don't know if that answers your question, but the truth is, with sort of 500,000 coming in, we are limited in what we can actually commission.
Councillor Quinnan.
Thank you, Chair. My question is brief, really. Yes, we are aware of the challenges in housing sector caused by various issues, which Chair has already mentioned, things like population growth, etc. But my question is, as you have, you've got all the data in front of you now, have you got like a time scale when you could say, by this year probably, we will more or less have dealt with these temporary accommodation issues? Thank you, Chair.
I don't think I caught all of that. So you want to know, you want a timescale of when we've dealt with what in particular, sorry?
Yes, when we could say we have dealt with housing shortages and reduced people in temporary accommodation, like those who have been waiting in this maybe for a number of years, 5 years in temporary accommodation, for example. So as you were working on this, is there a way of saying probably by this year we won't have so many people in temporary accommodation. Could you give us an idea of how long do you think the issue of placing people in temporary accommodation would go for? I don't know if I'm clear enough.
No, I understand what you're asking. Thank you. So the national plan to end homelessness does actually set out a number of targets. I think it's about 4 or 5 targets, but they are only for this parliament. So they talk about building up 1.5 million homes. They talk about halving long-term rough sleeping. So those are, and they also talk about taking families with children out of bread and breakfast. So those are the specific targets that are timelined for this parliament, and that is in the national plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've got one I would like to ask. It's probably of Rob rather than Neela, but this committee recommended that the combined authority approach government for a relaxation on space standards for specific trusted bodies to get front doors between people who would otherwise be homeless and the outside world, i.e. we don't put them in HMOs, we put them in self-contained studio flats or something, knowing that whilst desirable, the government standards are generous, and lots of people live in less than that. The place is well designed and well maintained and whatever. So if St Basil's wanted to build small but beautiful, then they should be allowed to.
Just to come back on that, Chair, I think it's really good actually that we've got Jean and Neelam in the room, because this is very much a live conversation that has been had by St Basil's and others with England and other parts of the system around how we address this. So how do we seek grant funding for homes that, according to the national standard, are smaller than they usually accept, but that they provide a specific purpose, which is exactly what the stepping stone accommodation is doing. I don't want to put Jean on the spot, and particularly not being in the room, but I know this has been an ongoing conversation with a more recent scheme of yours, Jean. Is it worth just being able to add a bit on that?
Yes, very topical at the moment. So as Rob described earlier, stepping stone accommodation, which is now in the prospectus and the affordable homes, which is fantastic, is exactly what you were talking about. It is accommodation. It can be up to 3 years, and it is for young people where rents are deflated below benefit levels, so they can live and work and be benefit free. So the kind of things that many of us with resources can do for our families, to stay at home, pay low rent, do an apprenticeship, whatever, for young people that haven't got that, it's not the case. So what you're trying to do then is, one, you're trying to make the scheme debt free, which is a challenge in itself, but superb assistance in relation to Homes England, Combined Authority, also Section 106 funding from a number of local authorities, Sandwell and Birmingham in particular, have been able to do that. So you deflate the rents, and then young people pay from their earned income. Okay. The issue with keeping it genuinely affordable is, if you've got 35 square meters apartments, they're expensive to run. Yeah. So actually what we're trying to do, and we've all responded collectively to the current planning consultation, to say, for those kind of specialist type accommodation, can they have particular space standards? Because actually what we're looking at really is the kind of thing works for students. So just across the road, you've got Birmingham Live and Work. Ensuite rooms, beautiful shared accommodation, all in costs, including all of your energy costs, your rent and everything else, less than £100 a week for young workers. Okay, now that would not have met 35 NDSS standards. Currently going through a similar situation in Coventry, where obviously planners are kind of, looking at all space standards and all the rest of it. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think hopefully the feedback that collectively we're giving on this planning consultation is that there will be consideration, because it's not a home for life. It is a stepping stone. It is linked with affordability and how you can get that experience. So yeah, I do agree with you. I think everybody's scared of shoe boxes that trap people in high costs for life. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are for specific purposes, specific periods of time, and are genuinely affordable. Yeah.
Thank you for that, and I wouldn't want general developers to get anywhere near this kind of discussion. I think the stepping stone. I mean, I converted my brother's flat with 135 square metres to. He then emigrated, and he's rented it out ever since. 2 people have lived in 35 square metres, more than comfortable, because it was designed properly, and you can do it. Now that's got access to outside space, which is important, and you have to think about all of these things and all that kind of stuff. But it is doable. And when I first started living, I was nowhere near 35 square metres with my wife. And here I am now. I didn't die. Anyway, thank you for that. Any other questions? And I think we had one recommendation. Or this session was not the last session. I can't remember.
It's on this one.
Yeah, yeah. And apart from that, I'd like to say thank you to Jean on behalf of this committee for all of the work she's put in. She is due to retire shortly, and I assume that means you'll retire not only from St Basil's but also from chairing the committee. But I'd like to thank you for all of your work.
But I bet you're still going to put your hand in, you're still going to be, you're not able to give up on that. It's one of them.
You can always find you a shoebox to live in. No, seriously, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you don't have to stay.
I've actually got another. So yeah, we'll leave you to it. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for it. Because one of the things we asked over a year ago was that this committee, because overview and scrutiny, you're into everything else that combined authorities do. So just keeping that, asking the question, are you including designing and homelessness? Are you including? It helps, keeps everybody else as well. Just focused on who's falling out. But thank you both.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Every time.
Thank you both. So if we could move on to the Connect to Work programme, we've got Nathan and Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. We're going to give myself and Laura an overview of the paper, bit of background to Connect to Work, and then some of the salient points in the paper and business plan, business case, so forth. So the paper provides an overview of the Connect to Work programme across the combined authority area. It sets out how it aligns the regional priorities and the impacts it's intended to make. So Connect to Work is part of the Department of Works and Pensions programme, that form a key part of the Get Britain Working strategy. It focuses on providing high quality, personalised employment support to people, particularly those that have disabilities, long-term health conditions, complex barriers to work, focusing on those who are economically inactive. For us as a region, the programme closely aligns to West Midlands Works and the Mayor's priority on jobs for everyone. It plays an important part of connecting employment skills and the health system. Although it's a rigid programme, the funding has allowed our local authorities to strengthen their local delivery they're offering to residents, aligning that to sort of more joined up services through single front door models of multi-agency venues. It also enables local authorities to further use the funding to support strategies to eradicate work and health barriers, with that being the main focus of it. And it is a big part of driving the delivery of the extra 93,000 residents into work that West Midlands Works aims to achieve. What makes Connect to Work distinct is the fact that it's the supported employment approach. So residents who would receive the support will get tailored support from the employment specialist. It's not just to enter into work, but it's also to sustain that work. So the programme supports people before they found work, but also provides support once they're in work. It follows two different but very linked fidelity employment models. So the first one of those is the individual placement programme, and the other is the supported employment quality framework. Those are both models that have got strong evidence base of support over years. However, they are kind of very strict frameworks, and they don't allow a great deal of flexibility from day-to-day delivery. It's worth noting, but the evidence has shown over many years of delivering that they support those with complex needs and get in higher outputs and outcomes than traditional mainstream. You know, the need for the intervention is very much significant in this region. We've got, you know, over 25% of our working age residents in the West Midlands area, nearly 500,000 people are economically inactive. Youth unemployment and claimant rates are higher than the national average across most of the local authority areas. We know that there's approaching 30,000 young people looking at claiming for work, but that probably figure is equal for those that are economically active. In terms of the scale of the programme, we had an initial 5.7 million allocated to first year of delivery, which was expected to support up to 1,400 residents. However, we've now got multi-year integrated settlement funding confirmed after the spending review in autumn, confirming 54.9 million funded for Connect to Work across the MCA area, so a significant increase, and this is looking to support over 16,500 residents. Connect to Work builds on successful programmes previously delivered by the WMCA and partners, like Thriving to Work. So it strengthens the region's experience of delivering these sort of supported employment programmes. Overall, Connect to Work represents a significant opportunity to help residents protect, particularly those that face barriers to moving to sustained work. I'll hand over to Laura to talk a bit more detail about the business case.
Yeah, so just a couple of points to add. So the paper sets out the Connect to Work business case, went through a WMCA investment board in April of last year. And that was very much setting out a collaborative local authority-led approach. So through consultation with employment skills directors, we agreed a focus cohort on young people. We know our young residents have a sort of significantly rising challenges in terms of mental health, as one of the examples of a health condition. And this model really does focus on person-centred, as Nathan alluded to. It's very much around understanding that person's barriers and challenges, and what do we need to put in place through interventions, linking with other services to support that young person quite quickly into work. This programme isn't really about building CVs, interview skills, you know, what skills you want now. This is around what work do you want now, and how can you be supported for the long term, up to a year, to sustain that good work, and then start thinking about progressing, bringing those skills elements in. So it's very much a longer, more high intensive journey for a young person. So obviously we focus initially on young people, but as we move through to the multi-year integrated settlement period now, that cohort is widening for local authorities to decide who that priority cohort needs to be, and of wider participants. So we then took the business case change request through our delegated sign-off. So we've got that multi-year approach approved now. And the appendix 2 shows the Connect to Work offer, which is quite different across each of the 7 local authority partner areas as well in this single year, and as we move into the multi-year period as well. Just in terms of those allocations across each of the local authority areas, for the single settlement year, with sort of a restriction of 1 year of funding, it was determined through, again, the employment skills directors, there would be an equal split across the 7 areas for each area to support up to 200 young people in that local authority. So that was the initial period of really just developing the service and understanding what each area needed for young people, and how we could really support more of that integration of other local services, and listening to the colleagues on the homelessness task force. You know, that might be linking young people's housing organisations, benefits counselling. You know, a lot of young people might worry that going into work might really damage their other income sources, and, you know, might make them feel nervous. So it's just understanding, you know, if you do work X amount of hours per week, what that impact on your, you know, most important income for young people would be. And moving through to the multi-year period, the funding has been allocated through the National Department for Work and Pensions formula. That's very much based on the proportion of economically inactive people in each of the local authority areas. And the disability employment gap one of the target focused groups for Connect to Work is people with disabilities who want to work and can do with that additional support, reducing and removing barriers and supporting them to sustain and progress in work as well. So it's really about that employment gap and then the index of multiple deprivation, so where those areas most need the funding. And Appendix 1 shows the breakdown of funding across both the year and the multi-year period as well. And I think just to finalise with just picking up on what Nathan talked about in terms of the Connect to Work is different from traditional employment support. It's very much around flipping that on its head. You know, we're not going to do a year's course and then think about moving into work. This is very much, what are your goals and aspirations now? What support do you need to get into work? And then let's support you for a long period of time so you can stay that. And it's about good work as well. So within the West Midlands Work Charter, work plan, we've got the Good Work Charter. This is about people getting into, you know, got jobs with progression opportunities and sustainable jobs as well. And I think that's me. Anything you wanted to finish?
Yeah, and I guess just moving on to the integrated settlement piece, and as Laura talked about the designated sign-off, we've worked with local authority partners to look at the next steps of this, pieces that we've learned, look at how the integrated settlement years, how does that fit into the system that's there? How, as Laura said, is there a local flavour for each of the authorities to how they want to deliver that, and make sure that the delivery plan delivers the kind of the programme rigidity in the sense of delivering that high quality, high fidelity service, but making it fit and meet what each local authority sees as their target area, and looking to support them to how they best deliver that through a kind of like a multi-agency approach, really. So yes, well, thank you, Chair. Any questions?
It would help if you could tell us exactly what you want us to agree to.
Yeah, so we were asked to come and do a programme update today.
Yep.
So we weren't asking, there was a specific recommendation that we were set out, but in terms of your feedback on the approach, how we've collaborated as well with local authority partners, potentially if there's any feedback from any local areas in terms of how we've undertaken that, good to know.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this initiative is something that can enhance the quality of life for millions of people in effect, and families are often affected more than financially. The quality of life, health, everything affects everything. On page 52, 1.6, 1.6, 1.7, give us the figure 5.2 million in the last year spent on this initiative, which where your figures of 950 and 1,400, there's a variation there of something like 35%, but I worked on an average of 1175. Is that reasonable?
So the 950 is the minimum number that government required us to support in this financial year 25-26. We've commissioned up to 1,400 people to be supported.
So my figures will be a little harsh for you. So in the first year we gave them £4,868 each on my figures, which are now a little harsh. So you could come down a little bit, couldn't we? I'll accept that by all means. But over the 4 years, you're hoping to put slightly more than 18,000 through this project. And with the allowing for the average funding over the 4 years, you come down to 3,397, which is a little harsh for you, by the way, as we've just agreed. Why was the overall figure reduced?
On that. So how the funding has been allocated to through DWP through the multi-year integrated settlement is based on the split of the model. So Nathan talked about two different models. We have the individual placement and support model and the supported employment quality framework model. And there's 75% expectation for the IPS, individual placement support, and 25% for the supported employment. Supported employment is a significantly higher unit cost, around about £5,000 to support an individual through.
Yeah.
And then you've got the lower unit cost for individual placement support. Within that as well, there's also people in work that can access support. So the average unit cost doesn't really sort of cover any of the 3 months specifically, but the in work support, you only get 4 months entitlement, and that's for people who are currently in work, maybe off sick with a health note or a fit for work note, and actually by getting 4 months of support, they can return to work, sustain it, and then continue without any additional support after 4 months. So the unit cost drops over the 3-year period because this is an up to 12 months journey for individuals. So somebody that starts in this month, March, will actually receive an entitlement of support up until next March. So we are expecting in the spending review for 29-30 further funding for this. But we can't get it through the multi-integrated settlement because that takes them up to March 29. And that would be to support everybody that starts in year 4 to get the support in year 5. So there will be more funding.
It's never going to go away, is it? This problem, no, I agree. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you, Chair. It's really interesting to know, this funding for 5.72 million was set aside for 2025-26 to get the 950 to 1400 individuals. This linking to your paragraph 2.1 to 2.42. So this program have achieved to date 42 young people within their schools. So can you just put some this impact? Is that impact showing from 5.7 million pounds?
So we're not expecting to be able to demonstrate the outcomes of that 5.72 million investment until March next year. So this is people starting the programme up to this March, and that funding then pays for their intensive support up until March 27. So it's always going to have that following on support year of financial support. So the investment is coming out this year, but we're not going to be able to see the impact of that.
So the on the one 3.4, but the paragraph 2.4.1, it says 562 individuals have been engaged. So number of engagement is still a bit low. Is there any barriers, obstacles you are facing which you need to support you to come forward?
And thank you for the offer, Councillor. So we've been working really closely with our local authority partner officers on this piece of work, and we had hoped that first young people would get support from around August, September time, but unfortunately that was delayed to October, November time. So we are a little late in starting, but we're confident we'll have those 950 people supported in that support period by tomorrow. One of the challenges that the paper has reflected a little is that we're using the Department for Work and Pensions system called PRAP, and provider referrals and payments. But what this does is it tracks earnings of individuals as well. So we don't have to ask young people for pay slips. They don't have to show us contracts of employment. So those outcomes that will be generated will be done so through the DWP system. So we're confident that once those people are in that system, we can track their outcomes of support. And yeah, we'll continue to work really closely with officers because this is a new service for a lot of local authority partners as well. They may not have delivered these specialist models before, so we're supporting them quite closely, and they're sharing learning and challenges with us early as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just to go back on kind of you picking out about the 42 position, because as Laura talked about the delayed start, most of the, I guess, starts and support for the individuals on the programme has probably been January, February, March time. So the numbers, that's so obviously that has a knock-on effect of meaning that the starts into work are slightly later. But thank you for your offer, appreciate it.
In essence, the government said the scheme starts on the 1st of April, but didn't make the money available for months thereafter. That's
yeah.
We're playing catch up all now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to know when we're going to get some delivery, as you know. Now, what we've got is 7 different schemes, basically. There's 7 different models. There might be some learning that will go across once we got there, although I'm very conscious. I know what Solihull is, and it's in basically 2 or 3 wards out of the 17. We've got loads of jobs, but how do we get those people in those wards into jobs? I know the issues elsewhere are not like So you can't actually say that scheme A worked, and therefore we should do it in place B, because it might work for different reasons. But
Yeah.
when will you be able to come back with some views on, here's how many people we've actually got into work, and I think you've got to be in work for 6 months before you can actually say they're in work. I don't know what your review is. And are there any learning lessons working with the partner local authorities?
So I think sort of 12 to 18 months time, where services are really established
From today?
from today, in terms of being able to sort of really demonstrate that impact, because part of the impact is around people getting into and sustaining work, but also the fidelity piece of these models. We'll have had our first annual assurance through an external review. So if you consider Ofsted education providers, fidelity reviews for supported employment providers are very much an overview of the service. And we'll get some really rich information from that in terms of that seven different approaches. And then the second part of your question, I think, was around sharing learning and challenges. So we've established through our WMTA's Fidelity Officer, we've established a communities of practice. So we're meeting on a quarterly basis, and that's with delivery leads, that's with employment specialists themselves, and we've got guest speakers that come in to really start to share. And we're getting some really great referrals, and we're getting some really great reach to young people in these certain areas through these different agencies. And I think referral is one of the really key parts of this programme, because if you've got a really developed and understood referral model, young people or adults, whoever's accessing the service, will know exactly what they're getting into. It's voluntary, they'll know it's not mandated. It has a different mindset from the very start. And I think the referral and the integration of different systems is a really key point of learning at the moment as services are just established.
So September 27, is that?
I think that would be a
Right, yeah.
suitable period.
And I think each of us, assuming we can get re-elected,
You're not
should be asking our own local authorities to review this at one of the scrutiny committees locally to see how it's going, and to support our officers that are doing what is actually quite a difficult job. For some of this is face-to-face, working with individuals in families where they haven't worked in 3 generations.
Yeah.
And helping officers is at least part of our job. Yeah, or encouraging them, shall we say.
Well, actually, if we don't get re-elected, I think it's our duty to actually ensure whoever is elected to the committees to actually lobby them and give them information so as they actually know what we've been doing, so as they're not coming into this blind. So that's what I'll try and do. It's one of them, because, I mean, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I can see how much we've actually achieved and what's gone on, and you know, this committee has done so much to help, and I think that really needs to continue. So it's a case of who isn't on this committee next time should actually be telling the person who is on this committee, we've done this and this, so as they can check this and this. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think what should happen.
Yes, can I just supplement? Is it the program was only available to local authorities at the moment, or are we looking at the wider partnership with the businesses or collaboration with all strategic partners?
So we do have a commissioned piece, a procured piece through an organisation called Short Trust, and that was the result of the 4 Black Country local authorities asking the WMCA to commission some of the services on their behalf. And we've also got an organisation called COOS, who are delivering an innovation pilot to young people, and that's testing some of the fidelity elements, and that's a digital service. So we do have 2 procured partners at the moment that we're managing a relationship with in partnership with local authority officers. And then we're also looking to commission some more provision as part of the multi-year for 3 of the Black Country areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know Walsall's one of them. Walsall's got Sure Trust.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're entering difficult economic times, so this is perhaps not the best time to start this, but you've got to start somewhere. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have just the one thing, just to note down, September 27th. There it is. Steve?
Thank you, Chair.
So this is the investment zone update. This is a very comprehensive piece of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a very complicated programme, Chair, but it's a bit of both. That too, absolutely. So thank you, Chair and Committee. So it has been a while since we've presented this programme. I think it was November 24. Before I go any further, I'd like to introduce Retire Mag and Laura Rasmin, who are the investment zone team alongside myself. So unlike the royal family, we are allowed to be in the same place at the same time. So this is entirely. I thought this morning, and I'm conscious of time, we finish at 12 today, don't we?
No.
No, we've got longer.
You've got a full half hour in total.
Thank you.
People agreed to stay until one. Yes.
Gosh, even longer. No, that's fine. Thank you.
No, we've got some items after you.
Oh, so I thought what we'd do this morning is one, to provide a bit of an overview on the programme for some members who may not be familiar with it. Then a bit of a detail on some of the sites and the programmes which we've been developing and the progress on those, and I'll hand to Retire and Laura for some of those elements as well, and then a brief forward look to the year ahead. Laura, could we jump on to the next couple of slides, please? Just give a bit of an overview. So, when West Midlands Investment Zone launched in 2024, it was announced by the previous government in April 2023. So we had a year of proposition development. A little bit like other schemes, we didn't actually get the funding for a few months into the programme. I think we just got it when we last presented to this committee, so it was autumn. It is probably the most comprehensive and complex economic intervention programme I think I've experienced, because it mixes capital funding for sites, investment attraction, revenue funding for existing businesses, and a whole range of other interventions. So it covers the whole of the West Midlands Combined Authority area plus Warwick. Why it includes Warwick is because you can see one of the key sites is down at the Coventry and Warwick Investment Zone, the majority of which is in the WDC area. So it does have the three sites which we'll touch on in a moment, in Warwick and Coventry, Birmingham and Wolverhampton. But it is a pan-regional programme because those will offer jobs and skills opportunities, obviously, as they come forward. But we have a number of regional business support programmes as well. So it isn't just about what people might perceive as shiny, glossy new investment. It is about how we actually invest in the economic ecosystem of the region as a whole. Oh, sorry, just stay on that one for a moment. We developed a proposition in between 2023 and 2024 around a number of key strands, as we'll see. But it's interesting to see that subsequent strategies and policies actually align well, or we align well with them. So I think the whole point of it was it's got to fit with the West Midlands economy. And as you can see through some of the aims of the West Midlands Growth Plan, even the Modern Industrial Strategy, the investment zone actually is well aligned to those strategic outcomes as well. Thank you, Laura. So first fundamental principle of the investment zone was to identify our key economic sector. We have one of 5 to choose from, including creative industries and 5 green industries, etc. So we said advanced manufacturing, but we have to make it relevant to the West Midlands. And you'll see some of the cluster strengths we have there around EV and battery development, green industries, health tech, which is an emerging cluster for the West Midlands, and that digital cross-sector capacity. It's really, really important. For me, that's the advanced bit of advanced manufacturing. How do we move on into the new industrial age? Thank you, Laura. The challenge was to identify, if we're looking at economic growth, what are the barriers and how can this money, we'll see the amounts of money involved in a moment, tackle those barriers. So I'm going to cover the middle two first, the physical and financial. So we've got sites, but they're not quite ready, or there's land remediation issues. We've also got a challenge around globally competitive sites and financial institutions. So how do we attract those in? So the two middle ones are around getting the capital funding into the sites, getting them up and ready. And then how do we actually use that long term, as we'll see in a moment, investment to maintain and sustain economic growth? And then the human and intangible,
Funding into skills programs, not big as we'll see, but some funding into that because we recognise that some of the challenges around this are the next cohort ready to come into those industries. And then the intangibles, some of the challenges that the SME and a large base of our economy, the challenges the SMEs have as well. So you'll see as we go through, hopefully, but in that right-hand column, the programme is designed to tackle the barriers in the left-hand column. Thank you. So the money bit, which I know some of the committee members are keen to hear about, the money bit is between 24 and 29. Government awarded £80 million of flexible funding. £15 million is top sliced for tax incentives, and I'll touch on those in a moment. Effectively, we were one of a few combined authorities who went for the whole package, which is tax incentives on some of the sites, capital and revenue funding, and business rate retention on some of the sites as well. We are assured of a second phase between 2029 and 2034 of similar £80 million. Again, the tax incentives will have to be top sliced because they're for a 10-year period. But again, how we split between the capital and the revenue is to be designed to come to the end of this year. We're going to start looking at that second phase. Box at the bottom is really important because on two of the sites we'll see in a moment, we identified business rate retention sites. That means that we can retain the rates uplift on those sites for 25 years from April 2024 with no risk of a government reset. So effectively everything from our up, so possibly over the lifetime of that £1.5 billion worth retained within the region for reinvestment. That's what I mean about it being a complex programme, but actually can be really, really impactful. We are only in the end of year 2, which I'll come on to in a moment. Thank you. So anticipated benefits, new investment on the sites estimated around £5.5 billion. I'm going to come back to the second one in a moment. Stick with the figures for a moment. Boosting regional economy and the supply chain around £30 million, which again, one of the special business support programmes. Advancement in the economic sector itself, in the advanced manufacturing, and you'll see in the bottom there looking at learners as well, so that comprehensive scheme as a whole. The second one, the 30,000 jobs, and the phraseology here might look like typical sort of southern bureaucratic speak, catalysing the creation of 30,000 jobs. The reason it says catalyse is because if you think that first 5-year programme is to get the money into the capital site so they're ready to attract investors in, we anticipate with the scale of development that comes through, that will create the 30,000 jobs. What we won't see is 30,000 jobs themselves necessarily in place within the 5-year period, which would be an extraordinary outcome if we could achieve it. What we're saying is that the development we're facilitating should enable that to come, and you'll see on some of the sites where that's likely to be most impactful. So let's just have a quick look at the 3 capital sites. If I may, Chair, I'll just do a very quick overview and then progress on those, and then we'll move on to the business support programmes across the region as a whole. So the first of the sites is at Birmingham Knowledge Quarter. To orientate you, you'll see the Curzon HS2 station just in the top of that picture, and the primary site, or the first phase site, is in and around Aston University and Birmingham City University, about 2 of the lead partners, along with 2 private sector developers from the SciTech and Woodbourne Group. The actual site, we'll see in a moment, sort of extends beyond that with the business rate retention area, but this is a bit we've got to get right, because this is, if you like, this covers all of the points that the investment zone is geared to do. Investment through capital attraction to make sites better and to attract investors in, and tax incentives to attract them in. You've got 2 leading skills providers in there, which are looking to build new facilities and provide new skills across a whole range of levels, very much reaching into the community alongside, which is the Nichols and Dudderston. You can just see in the left of the picture there. And then, as we'll see on the next slide, please, Laura, you can see that actually the red lines on the right, that's the business rate retention zone, 210 hectares as a whole. So if we can get the initial phase, which is down in that bottom left-hand corner, and you can see where some of those tax sites are, right, we get the uplift, we recycle that in, we reinvest into the site, and we can reinvest into the wider region as well. So this programme, as we start to get significant business rates uplift, can support an economic growth across the region as a whole. Doesn't have to stay in these sites. It will do it first because it's the virtuous cycle of getting the investment up and away, but then can go much wider over that 25-year period. Thank you, Laura. So that's Birmingham Knowledge Quarter focus in terms of the cluster on medtech, health tech, and digital. Potential for 20,000 jobs because you'll build higher. Second site, alphabetically, we'll go down to the southeast. Coventry and Warwick investment zone focus on EVs, battery development, electric vehicle supply chain as a whole. You're looking here effectively down Coventry Airport. So that is the runway of Coventry Airport, run for about 2 kilometres from west to east. And there are 4 sites here. So you've got Coventry Airport along the central bit, which is joint venture collaboration between Coventry City Council and Coventry Airport itself. And you have 2 other sites north and south of that, which are owned by Segro, and then a small one just in the background there, which is owned by Coventry City Council. This is a very, very large site. It is focusing on battery development. We are all subject to a macro economic climate. Battery development took a bit of a dip, but is coming back up. So we are receiving battery investment inquiries, live ones on this site, which is really positive. We just zip to the next one. And this is, whereas Birmingham was a series of small sites leading to a bigger one within that dense urban environment of Birmingham, this is much larger, traditional, almost Freeport style development, if you like, across Coventry Airport. You can see the other sites. But large tax incentive sites across in the green, you can see the attraction there. And then on the right is a business rate retention area again. So larger, 240 hectares, but again, that opportunity to take loans or borrow against future rates for get the site up and away, but then in the long term reinvest in wider economic growth as well. So jobs, opportunities on the site, but more widely as well, and future economic growth as well from here. And then the third site is up at Wolverhampton. The Green Innovation Corridor itself, a much larger strategic site, runs from city centre right the way up to I-54. Ambitions there around green industries, green computing, green technology, very much a Green Innovation Corridor. And the funding from the IZ is just focused on the next slide, please, on the capital investment into a number of sites in and around the Springfield campus, in particular 6 Mile Green, which sits between that and the Science Park. This scheme very much led by the City Council and the University of Wolverhampton. In all of these developments, the universities have been critical and key because you're looking at future innovation, future skills as well. So capital investment here, no tax incentives or business rate retention, but land remediation through that capital investment. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to rampage through as quickly as possible. Sorry, I've already been longer than I intended, Jay, apologies. Progress to date on the sites is that we've already seen some investment and the climate in Birmingham Knowledge Quarter. You can see Cisco and EcoFlow have landed. Woodbourne Group has secured £400 million off the back of this being an investment zone site for wider development across the Knowledge Quarter. Woodbourne Group also at MIPIM launched their Birmingham BioCity, which is their first site to bring forward life sciences and medtech. So we are seeing momentum in Birmingham Knowledge Quarter. I think there's more to do around how we can make sure that capital investment really does stitch those sites together. But it is certainly getting a lot of investor interest, which is really positive. Aston University, very active, have just launched a business hub again. It's about giving confidence to the marketplace, and the business hub launched last week in Woodcock Street. The Coventry and Warwick investment zone, the 2 Segro sites have got inquiries coming in already. One of them was already a little live, so we're taking business rates already from that, which is really positive because that can be reinvested in bringing that site forward. And there have been a number of battery inquiries already. Wolverhampton Green Innovation Corridor have got some hybrid planning in place for the sites, have done the scoping for land remediation, and we're just about to award them the 6.25 million for the full land remediation. And is it for me to hand over, Laura, please? So if you can hold on that one just for a moment, sorry. Reason you'll see two different colours. So Birmingham Knowledge Quarter is just at an amber at the moment because we're a little behind on the capital programme. It's not significant, but the transport, they're both transport schemes, but improving public realm as well. And we're just a little bit behind profile, which is shown as amber at the moment. We hope to ramp up in the year upcoming, and it will be supported by more retail master plan work there as well. So those are the three key sites. They will, of course, offer job opportunities to a wider geography, but the regional business abroad programmes are clearly pan-regional. So perhaps we can move on to those. And Ricardo, would you like to take us through some of these?
I'll be quite quick. So the first programme that we've had this year go live is the supply chain transition. This is a £12.5 million programme. Initially it was over 4 years, but because of all the tendering exercise, contracting negotiations, we've sort of shaved off 6 months, and so it's a 3.5 year programme. It started in October of this year, and it was awarded to Coventry Warwick Business Solution, that delivered under the banner of Supply Smarter with a number of consortium members. CWBS is the leading organisation, with MTC as a consortium member, the Warwick Manufacturing Group from University of Warwick, as well as Birmingham University, Coventry University and University of Wolverhampton. So they're working very collaboratively on all three work streams within supply chain transition. And that includes one-to-one support to businesses, understanding the intensive support that is required by those businesses, and providing that support within that consortium. So the first element around business support is very much about engaging and understanding what business needs are. Then following on from that is then understanding what support businesses need around their skills agenda, and that could be around upskilling, reskilling, and we're very much focusing on leadership and management in that programme. Then finally, the third element around supply chain transition is the research and development grant. So there is a £6 million pot in that for three and a half years to support SMEs largely, but a number of also key customers, which is large companies, can be supported under that banner. And as it said on that slide, currently we are working with a number of businesses on R&D grants and supported 3 as of last week. Also, just to say, in terms of where we are with the outputs and the results from this first initial year of the programme, we initially said we will support 30 businesses. As of Friday, we have supported 31 businesses, which is great. And then we've also said that we wanted to support 20 level 4, level 5 management and leadership, but we've supported 14 to date. And also to say another milestone that we've actually achieved, which is the rollover contract. So this isn't a contract for 3.5 years that would go straight to Coventry Warwick Solutions. Every year we will review the contract and roll that contract, as well as the outputs and the budgets. So I think we can say we're in a position now where we can see this programme really taking off. We've had teething issues, but we've overcome those challenges, and we're in a position now to see more results. And hopefully when we report back to you in a couple of years' time, we'll be able to see what the impact of the programme has been across the whole region. Right, Midlands Mine Forge. I think before we talk about Midlands Mine Forge, one of the challenges we had as a programme was to look at equity funding within the region and how we can invest the allocated £2 million within the investment zone within an equity programme. There have been a number of options that were scrutinised, we explored, and eventually as of towards the summer of last year, we agreed that Midland Mine Forward was probably the correct organisation or the right route into investing that £2 million. So Midland Mine Forward is a Midlands organisation. It is made up of 8 founding universities within the Midlands. They've been around probably since 2023, trying to build their equity fund in terms of trying to support IP-rich organisations or businesses, as well as spin-outs from universities. What I can say is, as of October last year, it was agreed that the West Midlands Combined Authority, East Midlands Combined Authority, UK Research England, which is part of the universities, and the Rigby Group would support the investment in Midland Mine Forge. So in total, there was just under £8 million invested into Midland Mine Forge as of October last year. And what are we getting for our investment? So obviously, our interest lies in West Midlands spin-outs, IP-rich companies, and we have tasked Midland Mine Forge in trying to build a pipeline around that. So from November last year, one investment was made to a Midland company, not West Midlands company, of £300,000, and the pipeline was looking incredibly healthy. So currently there are 2 West Midlands businesses that are being supported literally as of the last couple of weeks in terms of investment, and that's just over £1 million coming from Midland Mine Forge. The pipeline, as I said, is looking really, really healthy. 11 businesses, of which 5 are West Midlands. They are looking to build the due diligence around this, and we will understand more what that investment portfolio will look like in the summer of this year. I probably should have done the skills slide after the supply chain transition, only because the skills proposition has taken a little bit longer to mobilise and understand what we want to invest the £2.5 million on the skills proposition for this programme. And we're trying to encourage any work around skills proposition to align with supply chain transition because of the leadership and management programme. But what I can say, even though it's taken a little bit longer to probably take off, the engagement with local authorities, stakeholders like universities, further education institutions, has been greatly appreciated in developing these programmes. So as a result of that, the skills team have developed 4 propositions. And as you can see there, we've got the business engagement, the modular skill, the place-based skills hub, and the skills delivery capacity building. So we know what those work streams are going to be, but they do all interlink together. So for example, the business engagement and incentives, that will run across our job rotation programme, potentially could also run across the MedTech new qualification that was launched last year. And what we're looking to do is understand, working with businesses, what that incentivisation will look like. So we're not doing this in isolation, and we're not trying to regurgitate what's been done over the last few years. We're trying to understand what does the region need from a business perspective, but also we're trying to understand residents. We're trying to understand employees who are working around their upskilling requirements, their reskilling requirements, and trying to build programmes around that. So it's early days yet. And I think what I want to touch on finally on number 4, skills delivery capacity. This is quite new, because when we're looking at high level skills in level 4, level 5, we don't quite understand what the demand is and what the need is. So currently we are out with invitation to tender to understand what that capacity looks like and what that need looks like. And that will feed into the IZ over the next 3 years, so we can help develop the next phase of the programme. And I think I'll leave skills there and hand over to you, Laura.
So as part of the programme, we commissioned the West Midlands Growth Company £500,000 per year to support the promotion of the IZ and attract new foreign direct investment, and to kind of create things like collateral, as you can see on screen. If we had some time, we could play our hero film, which is like a nice trailer for the IZ, those key events, and raise awareness of the IZ to investors. As of February this financial year, the growth company had a target of generating 65 leads, and they met that with 90. They also had a target of developing 25 leads, which they've met against 52. That's, for example, things like Cisco coming into Steamhouse at BKQ, which Steve mentioned earlier. They're a worldwide leader at networking and security. And this, even though it wasn't a metric for this year, they have actually also landed 3 leads, which are free site visits from major battery manufacturers to Coventry Warwick Investment Zone. So that's the kind of things we hope to see pick up in the new financial year. We also have 3 new site films nearing completion. These are going to be used as part of our comms plan to promote the sites at events like UK Reef. And there's also kind of interview pieces as well that can be used alongside that. We are currently preparing for UK Reef, which is taking place from the 19th to 21st of May, where Birmingham Knowledge Quarter and the Green Innovation Corridor will be showcasing their early master plans. And other kind of key events that took place over the year were attending CIFIT, which is the China International Fair for Investment and Trade, which took place in September 2025. This resulted in 13 leads qualified, which were for Coventry Warwick Investment Zone and BKQ. Also the Merrill mission to India and also MIPIM in March 2025. So it's been a good year so far for the delivery of investment promotion.
Thank you both. We'll just rattle through the last few slides. Capacity funding, really important. We were always very clear with government that this couldn't be an add-on to roles and responsibilities of local authorities just as is. So we set aside significant funding to support our local authority partners to bring forward their sites. You can see that in the table there. And I think that has proven, and local authorities had complete freedom to identify what they wanted to use a capacity for. So how would they best use? So Coventry focused a little bit more on marketing side of things, and Birmingham would look more at some of the officer stuff for master planning, for example. So different approaches, complete freedom to use that funding. Thank you. Across the 4 programmes, I won't repeat the work that both Laura and Rakaya outlined your successes to date. So let's move on from that one. Thank you for that. In terms of the RAG rating, all are going well. Skills is just showing there as amber because we are a little bit behind profile this year. It's taken a little while to move from programme design, as you outlined, Rakaya, having done the consultation with a wide range of partners, but the programmes are going through the design phase very positively and will ramp up and accelerate delivery in the year ahead. Thank you. 2 areas just to touch on quickly. The business rate retention is a brilliant offer from government. As I say, it could raise as much as £1.5 billion in the region, but it is an extremely complex mechanism, especially when you're looking at tax increment finance, how do you borrow against future rates, etc. Rates, as I say, are beginning to come through on one of the sites down at Coventry and Warwick Investment Zone already. So this is very much for deeds. The legal stuff is in place. Now we've got to do that very serious financial modelling with our local authority partners, both within the sites first, to get that reinvestment right, and then future years, and there will be future years, how does that support a wider integrated approach to funding across the region? So that's a priority for the next and upcoming year. Interestingly, this is coming along at the same time where actually the region is taking a much more integrated strategic approach to funding and finance. So conversations with a number of national financial institutions known as PUFFINs, which is a great acronym. National Wealth Fund being the key player in that, and I think there's been quite a bit of publicity around the partnership agreement we formed with them. Why is that important? Well, it means that you're actually bringing a whole range of other funding routes potentially to the sites, not just those 3 sites, but across the region as a whole. So it isn't just our capital funding going into, say, Coventry and Warwick Investment Zone, but the potential other financing routes as well. Thank you. Forward look. So if I was to say year 1, which was a sort of half year, was about mobilising the programme and getting a great team on board with Rakaya and Laura. Year 2 has been very much about getting all of the programme aspects live and functioning. So capital programmes are all going, regional support programmes are all active. Year 3 is continuing that momentum, very much working with our partners to accelerate investor interest. So that's with working with the growth company to make sure we get investment into the sites. That business rate retention, strategic financing, really, really important. And then the last piece is to say that the programme itself is comprehensive, but it can't do everything. It's just one tool in the box that we need to use. But we need to do more, I think, to plug in some of the other programmes which are out and about in the region. So, for example, in innovation funding, how do we get that in and through the sites? If we've got the universities working closely with us, huge opportunity there. So focus for year ahead, make sure we're maintaining momentum, look at some of those thorny issues around business rate retention, get that right, and then work on the innovation and other aspects of economic growth. And I think that is all of this, unless you wanted a 2-minute showing of a fantastic film, which goes with the programme, which Chair will leave to your discretion. Thank you.
I think we'll head straight to comment.
You can share a link outside.
Wow. There's a lot in there. It's slightly easier for me because I've attended a number of investment board meetings, so I've had a slow introduction. Councillors, shall I ask a couple of questions? To me, these are regional plays with a lot of money. They're not about the locations in which they sit.
No.
Have you actually done a piece of work that says how far, if it was either half an hour or 40 minutes travel to work time, have we done the bubble maps to show who would actually benefit from this? If you were in London, you'd say an hour, but I think an hour is probably a bit rich for the West Midlands. I don't think
55 minutes.
Sorry?
Ours is 55 minutes.
55 minutes. Have we done a piece of work that would show where each of these sites would get to? Because some of these sites are very accessible, like Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, because it's the end of the metro. And by the time we finish the extension out in your area, I assume that would be quite easy to get to.
Go from Warsaw because we ain't got the metro.
Hence my comments, but there are railways. Have you done that piece of work? Can it be done?
It has been done for the wider economic growth plan, which we talked about, and we've mapped that across our sites as well, so we can see that reach. So, for example, and I'll just give a couple of examples if I may, the Wolverhampton Green Innovation Corridor, through the growth plan and now the investment prospectus of the proposition around Wolverhampton and Walsall Growth Corridor is coming through really strongly. And we are seeing quite a few opportunities for the University of Wolverhampton to reach into the wider Black Country, particularly. The other example I'll give is the work that's coming through at the Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, where some of the courses that Birmingham City University off the back of this are exploring will certainly reach into the Sandwell area and the new hospital down there. So we've got the technical bit that sits behind because we overlap with the growth plan and the work that's been done there. So you can see where that will come through. But the London one is really interesting because, again, this is when this was announced and launched, it did form that sort of catalyst of excitement. And so there's now a lot of conversations happening between universities in the West Midlands and universities in London off the back of the HS2 extension, where that will be reduced to sort of 40-minute connection. So there is a lot of really interesting conversation around innovation and R&D as well as skills and jobs as well, which is coming through as well. So the technical bit underlays all of it. Now we're looking at where those other opportunities are to build.
But could we do a travel to work
for the sites? For
the individual sites?
Yeah.
Show.
That's a good show.
I mean, I thought 40 minutes. Councillor Kettle thinks 55 minutes. What kind of number? He's probably right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to go with that.
Thank you. We will do that.
An hour, whatever.
And where it came from was when we were talking at the hub and Solid Hub and HS2 coming in and the extension and work to area from the 55,000 jobs that were created down in Solid Hub within the hub. We started to talk about who would benefit from that, because it's way to the south or southeast of the area, and that figure came out of that.
Well, I'm happy on that, and it will be because what we need to do is reassure people these aren't going to be high-paying jobs. That's the objective. This is not the everyday economy. This is the going into the future high-paying jobs economy, and that will transfer wealth out of these sites into maybe less affluent areas, which is what we want to achieve. We don't want to force people who live in Sandwell to go and live in Birmingham. We want them to live in Sandwell where their families are, and but still end up with some very well paid jobs. So,
and if I may, Chair, just as a very quick follow up and on that, the other geographic point we will do is we're monitoring and mapping where some of those businesses are, which are receiving that direct support from the on the supply chain transition. We're already working, I think, in the Black Country with businesses there. And that's that next phase of, as well as the family that lives in Sandwell, not just having to go to Birmingham, but actually the businesses in and around them in those locations are equally being helped and enhanced into those future jobs as well. So that's why I say it's quite a complicated one, but it's quite comprehensive.
and whilst I say Sandwell, I do know is there 5 towns in Sandwell? There's a lot in West. It is not a place, is it? It is a group of places.
It is.
Councillor Quillen.
Thank you, Chair. For me, it's just, again, a simple question about what evidence could you show us that the IZ jobs and investments are reaching local residents and not just the incoming firms? By local residents, I mean within the region. Thank you.
So thank you through you, Chair. The jobs at the moment are, so let's give the job on the big scale, the large scale stuff, when we're looking at capital investment, those will come through in later years. But the jobs that are coming through at the moment, so we'll look at the Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, for example, with Cisco and EcoFlow. Certainly the work that those companies, so Steam House, Birmingham City University and Steam House, in ensuring that investors are offering those opportunities to local workforce. They're also exploring how, for example, at the Aston Business Hub, the business incubation unit there is also reaching into Dudston and Nichols. So the large scale business numbers won't be coming through at this stage, but what we are, just through the conversation we just outlined, Chair, looking at how those geographies will make sure that we can plug those in through ease of transport as well. Much more integrated approach.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I've got 2 more questions. One is this med tech qualification. I was around long enough to see all kinds of offshoots of professional courses, which frankly were just dumbed down versions which got people nowhere. There's veterinary colleges, become vets, and then there's some kind of veterinary something or other, which is just a route to nowhere. Can you just kind of convince me that this is something employers really want rather than something the universities want to provide?
I can't, but I know someone who can. It's an unfair pass, obviously. Retire, you've been very close to the conversations with the team. So.
Absolutely, no, Chair. So when the qualification was being developed, so it was developed with Pearson's qualification board, the stakeholders involved were not only the institutions around education and learning, like higher education, further education, but also employers. Employers, especially within NHS and anything to do with public health sector, were very keen to upskill their workforce from that level 2, level 3 qualification to those clinicians who had degrees, postgrad qualifications. And there was that gap in the middle around workforce not being able to propel from admin type roles, officer type roles to go into the more higher level. But more importantly, what the sector was showing was there was a gap in technical skills. And this is what medtech qualification does, because it's at level 4 and level 5, it's got that technical element. And I can assure you it's been done with a lot of stakeholders in mind. And while we're trying to build knowledge base within schools and colleges or anything to do with post-16 education, we are also mindful of what the jobs are available. So on our employer working group, we've got the NHS on there, and they're very much telling us what type of jobs will be coming through in the next 3, 5, and 10 years. So I think what we can say is it's a great start, and I'm not going to say until we actually get learners on that qualification whether it meets the requirements of the sector and the region, but we've got to start from somewhere. So at the moment, I can assure you we've been engaging with all levels.
If I may, Chair, just a quick follow-up, and I think the conversations, I did say that the medtech and health tech area was an emerging sector, and I think it is. And the West Midlands is getting something of a recognition for that. I think the important thing is how some of the private sector businesses as well working who provide to the National Health Service others can also develop those opportunities. Because they're there and they're emerging ever more.
The latter bit is the bit I'm really interested in, because what we're trying to do is get private sector employers onto these investment zone issues and raise the game. The NHS can train its own people, is my general view. The private sector, because it's big enough to do that, the private sector tends to be a bit more fragmented. So providing qualifications that they will use, to me, is vitally important, because it's the private sector that's going to get our people out of poverty. And that's really what I'm interested in. We have got too many people with not enough money to live on in the West Midlands and not enough housing to live in, but we've talked about that earlier.
And I think, if I may, Chair, a quick follow-up on that is with the role of universities is much more beyond the academics. So the work that Aston, for example, are doing with private sector medical teams is quite remarkable, and I think we'll see ever more, particularly the Woodcock Street site as well.
Okay, and my $64,000 question. We've got 3 sites.
Yep.
Which is going to be the most successful, based on what you know now?
Most successful in job numbers, most successful in impact, more widely, most successful in
high-paid job numbers.
In high-paid job numbers, this is unfair, certainly with.
No. Also taking account of the chances of it actually working.
So the scale of it, I would say, the Green Innovation Corridor is a number of different initiatives which have come forward into strategic, and our investment is relatively low there on the sites of those. The other 2 are so distinctly different, and this isn't me hedging with bets, but the Birmingham Knowledge Quarter immediately beside Curtin HS2 in the Mayoral Development Corporation area in the heart of the country's 2nd biggest city, where the scale of development, where it will go up and it's a whole new placemaking, will have massive impact, absolutely massive, as part of that wider city growth. If you imagine, it's not King's Cross, but if you come in and pull in on the train to St Pancras and you look out to the right, you've got the Crick Institute, you look to your left, you've got King's Cross and all of that regeneration and development. Smaller scale, but that is a potential for Birmingham Knowledge Quarter. Huge. And with the universities you've got in there, you've got a real breadth of skills which will come up and through that one. Coventry and Warwick Investment Zone is a large site which genuinely could be a national player in terms of battery manufacturing and EV supply chain. Genuinely, I'm not exaggerating that, because it's the planning permissions in place, the inquiries which are now coming through are live and significant. That is a different scale. That's why it's hard to say. So on the Green Innovation Corridor, hugely important as part of that strategic corridor as a whole. The other 2 in terms of national profile and impact and regional within that, I'd say are going to be, they're different, and so it's hard to say which will be the most. And the Green Innovation Corridor, just to note, is only because of the scale of investment. It's not going to be impactful.
And we actually have some building going to happen in Birmingham.
So
some developers who are actually going to dig holes.
Yeah. So we've got, I mean, the interesting thing, so in terms of new build, as I say, Birmingham BioCity, which is the Curzon Wharf site. I won't put the picture back up, but it's effectively at the northern end of that triangle. If you see from Curzon HS2, it's only still a 5 to 10 minute walk. It's not far. They've launched at Mipham, 130,000 square foot. looking at investment coming forward, planning permission later this year, demolition of existing, etc. We have inquiries. The interesting thing about Birmingham Knowledge Quarter is there are assets there already. So Enterprise Wharf, again, live inquiries there as well. Faraday Wharf, I know there are investment inquiries there. The next step is to get the new buildings up, and that's where Aston BCU particularly have got sites which are car park at the moment. But we've got existing assets there, and those are the inquiries we really need to encourage on them through.
Right.
Sorry, I hope that didn't sound too hedging my bets on them.
That's all right. I think you gave an overview of that. That's very helpful. Just make sure the canals are well developed in yeah, I'm a personal interest in it. Right. Are we there on that issue? Yes. So we move on to the final substantive issue, building safety in the West Midlands. And thank you. And this is on Teams, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues from the Combined Authority and councillors. It's great to sort of see you here. I do promise that this item won't be as long as your last item, to make sure you can get off in good time. So I'll be very quick to sort of run through this. We have got currently about sort of 3 slides as well, so if you wish I can kind of run through that. Hopefully you've also had an opportunity to run through the paper on the plan, which has obviously been given to you beforehand. To share my slides. Okay, can you see the front cover okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. So you will all remember, and if you all cast your mind back to 2017, the 14th of June to be precise, you remember the awful Grenfell situation we had in London. Obviously, since then, there's been a lot of work being carried out. And this item, even though it's not as long as your previous piece, it's still virtually as important and an exceptionally important piece of work that needs to be done. So just so the WMRAP is West Midlands Remediation Acceleration Plan, just so you know what that sort of stands for. In September of 2024, the MSAs were empowered to develop these local remediation acceleration plans by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And this was really to resolve all specific local challenges. And the reason being is because within the region we have a lot of issues of still buildings which still have combustible products in their external wall systems. So this is still deemed as being a major issue for us 8 years on, ladies and gentlemen. It's still posing as a problem. So hence why the government has asked us to sort of put together one of these remediation acceleration plans. And that was kind of done after the Grenfell Public Inquiry Phase 2 report, which kind of happened in sort of September 24. So West Midlands Combined Authority, we collaborated at pace with a number of our strategic partners. As you can appreciate, we've got a lot of local authorities which have been working with very closely on this. The West Midlands Fire Service, Homes England, the Building Safety Regulator, which is a new regulator, and the Cladding Safety Scheme, and a number of different partners, and helped us to kind of develop that. And this was done over a number of iterations. It wasn't a small job by any means. What we did last year, we launched it at a building safety conference, which was held last September, and this enabled us to have a 3-month consultation and feedback period with external stakeholders, with industry experts, with subject matter experts, people who are really important and can really sort of give us some significant input into this plan to make sure it's right. And that was really crucial for us. So we've already done that, which I think is really great. And then what actually happened is that over the country, we've got 12 MSAs currently. 10 of those MSAs had developed a plan. Ours we didn't, because we wanted to make sure it was right, but now we have published that. And I think there's still 2 plans which are outstanding, but we published ours in January of 26 of this year. So that's now there, and it's now uploaded onto a gov.uk site. What is it? So the the West Midlands Remediation Acceleration Plan, it brings together greater coordination, and that's really key for us. It identifies enforcement clarity, engagement, and seeks to strengthen joint partnership working arrangements for the regulators. The main brunt of this is working with the regulators. So this piece is all about making sure the regulators can actually do their job now, and I'll explain that later on in the delivery part. So just to give you a little idea, the plan it incorporates 3 key priorities: fix buildings faster. As you can appreciate, we need to take off all the combustibles from the external parts of these walls and these buildings. Still, we need to identify any unsafe buildings with unsafe cladding present, and that's important because, believe it or not, we're still finding buildings which have still got this combustible cladding on them. So there's a big piece to do with still needing to identify that, and government don't have the details, they don't have the data on that. So there's an important piece there for us. And crucially, we need to kind of support our residents, our leaseholders, the people living in the buildings, because they are still obviously a threat, from that awful combustible product. I wanted to give you a flavour as well for where we are currently within the country, just to kind of bring some context to that. So you see the red arrow pointing to the West Mids. We've currently got about 58 buildings which we're needing to get in programme. What does in programme mean? Well, basically, going back slightly, we have a total number of known buildings, 11-metre buildings. If you remember, originally it was high-rise buildings. That's 18 metres and above. Government then extended that to include 11-metre plus buildings within the West Midlands. And within the West Midlands, we have about 715 residential buildings across residential, commercial and civil sectors, which allow people to live in them. And they're the buildings we've got concerns with. Now, a year ago, April 25, we had about 90 buildings which were classed as in programme. And these are in programme means these are buildings which are within a government type building programme, but have not yet started remediating on site. So basically, the builders haven't yet put up the scaffolding, the principal accountable people haven't started the building, but they're in programme. Okay, so that's what that states. So 90 buildings about a year ago were in programme, not started on site. The present being April 26, we've got about 57 buildings which are kind of in programme. So you can see the number is depreciating down, which means we're kind of working through these last remaining buildings, which I think is really important. As opposed to the rest of the country, you'll notice we've got 57 now. Places like London, they've got well over 100, well over 1,000. So it's quite a significant difference with that. And then, as you're well aware, the paper is all about sort of endorsing our approach to how we're dealing with this issue, how we sort of wanting to deliver this plan. So then what we're wanting to do is to make sure that the MW RAP is due to receive new burdens funding from the government. So again, we've asked for more money and we've got a 3-year settlement now, which has been agreed from April this year to sort of 2029 to deliver the plan. So we've got 3 years of settlement, which is due to come. We've just been confirmed on Saturday, actually just gone, by the ministry what money we're going to get. Not the full amount of money we're hoping for, but it's sufficient for us to do the job correctly. The funding allocation will be issued, obviously, to the regulators. They get direct money from the government, but we will also receive a good proportion of the money. And then what we then do as a combined authority is then we issue out that money to those authorities where they can evidence they're actually progressing and successfully progressing the actual remediation of the buildings, through working with the accountable holders and the accountable people, what we call responsible persons. The money will probably likely go to the bigger authority like Birmingham. Last year, Birmingham was very successful. It took a landmark case out against one of the owners of one of its biggest buildings, a place called Centenary Plaza in the city, and we successfully prosecuted the owners of that building. So that's where the money really needs to go. It's kind of very much enforcement focused. The other big thing I mentioned about was the MRAP is wanting to cleanse, verify and integrate data into what we call the single source of truth data. And that's really important for us. So at the moment, you might appreciate that we have lots of different government bodies, different data sources, which all give different data, which is all very indifferent. It's very frustrating for us. So what we're wanting to do is to find that regional data source and create that. So we're just employing at the moment a lead data information and analyst to help us with that. And as I said a second ago, the WM Rapids endorses an enforcement-based approach, which is really crucial. It's been 8 years, as I mentioned earlier on, of informal letters, engagement, working with these different accountable people, these different organisations. But some of these buildings are still not remediated. So it's really crucial we think about this enforcement-based approach. So we've been looking at the challenges, the blockers to remediation. Why haven't these responsible people done the actual remediation? And obviously what the plan has done is pick through some of these issues. And we've got about 11 or 12 different blockers, which we're sort of working on and managing to sort of resolve, which is very positive. We're also seeking to work alongside the ministry. Obviously, the program's out there already. The CSS, which is the Cladding Safety Scheme, which is owned by the department, which comes under Homes England, and then the RAS, which is the Responsible Actor Scheme. So that's the developer's pledge. In easy words, that basically a developer, some of the big national developers, have signed an individual contract with central government where they're promising to kind of remediate some of these buildings. But again, they're taking a very long time to do that. So we're sort of working with those kind of teams within central government to ensure they can actually do that. So it's kind of a top-up, bottom-down approach to that. And then something that's really good that we've set up is wanting to achieve sort of this compliance through using a regional multidisciplinary joint inspection team, and that's kind of based on a central government model, which is working very successfully at the moment. Already working within Birmingham, so it's a kind of team of local experts, not sort of relying on sort of national experts, but trying to build a local team to kind of do their own work, and they're mainly based within a team within Birmingham, which is working very successfully. And all this work we've kind of put together, we've kind of already built it into our own internal plan, as you're well aware. We've put together what we call a business justification plan, and that's our sort of way that the combined authority sort of gets it approved, and that's been successfully gone through the SAF system, which assesses it and appraises the the actual plan that we put forward. And then, really importantly, we're wanting to work with our sort of resident groups, and that's what we have been doing, meeting with them in forums, sort of talking to them, having sort of mayoral roundtable meetings with them, and really seeking feedback from them on the plan, and then obviously providing them some sort of lobbying opportunity to sort of advocate their needs to central government. And really that is it. They're the kind of the three slides I wanted to sort of share with you, to give you a very brief overview of what the plan is trying to achieve. Yeah, it's up to yourself. Can we take any questions? I'd love to take questions.
Councillors. Walters.
Is there a given date where all these buildings, so like you said, there's 1,000 in London. Is there a given date, a target where these buildings should be put up into consideration? So they actually pass fire regulations, I get the word, don't they? So they pass because it's actually scary to actually think. I mean, we've got 100 and something, you said, in West Midlands, but it's scary to think there's 1,000 buildings in London that have still got that fire retardant stuff on that doesn't work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's a very good question, and you're dead right. I mean, as the plan indicates, it's an acceleration plan. So what we're trying to do is to accelerate as quickly as possible to achieve, the needs of ensuring that all those buildings have got the products, the combustibles removed. And you're dead right. So yes, there is a target. So central government's target is December 29, and we've sort of aligned our target with that. Now, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to have all the products from all those buildings taken off by December 29. But what we certainly endorsed is the requirement for all those buildings to be engaged, and we've got action against those buildings. So there's the need to either, whether it's a legal case going against a building, or the actual remediation is in progress, but we certainly want to sort of show success and movement and progression to kind of having these buildings as close to that sort of target date as possible.
Okay. I've got a few. I mean, to me, this is one of those, it wasn't urgent, but it was important. Due to delays, it's now become both urgent and important, because eventually, if you wait long enough, something horrible is going to happen. I mean, that to me is the issue. I think we all support the robust approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Falling out of that, I don't know if it's just my local authority. I had to intervene on a legal issue to get the legal people to focus on it because they're overwhelmed. And I suspect, I don't know whether Birmingham is different, being a far larger authority. Have we considered setting up a specialist legal team at regional level to actually focus on this one issue, given that we are going to take a robust action on it?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's something we've obviously considered. Interestingly, for you today, we've got 2 legal interns actually on our call, who have just recently joined this program, which is really encouraging. We're working very closely with obviously the legal teams, the head of civil and litigation services from Birmingham City Council. We're working very, very heavily and clearly with the West Midlands legal team as well. And whenever we have any issues across any of the other local authorities, we're working very closely with those teams. The legal teams, you're absolutely spot on, are the ones where the pressure is definitely upon them. What we're hoping to do is to sort of see the impact that our sort of legal staff are under to determine whether or not we need to kind of bolster and kind of give extra support to those teams. I think setting up a new team might take quite some time now, but I do want to sort of ensure that we can encourage and strengthen the existing teams we already have who understand the processes. You're dead right. Birmingham was really interesting. My initial job, I used to work in Birmingham City Council as the high-rise program manager over there. And it was really difficult to get the legal team behind, taking on board what was taking a major sort of building owner to task over not sort of complying with an improvement notice served on them. They just were really reluctant to do that. However, they did do it in the end, and they took the results because we had the strength of a case, a very strong case, which we secured, and we got the successful prosecution. The way we also did that, councillors, we actually worked with a external counsel, so using it to our advantage. So what we are also doing is able to sort of apply for sort of central government enforcement funding to kind of to ensure that we can build a strong case prior to taking any of these cases to court with external funding from central government, using external counsel. And then if and when we ever do go to trial, there's again another support mechanism which enables us to apply up to about £100,000 per case to ensure that we can sort of, make sure we've got the right people, the right staff to sort of to take the case through if it ever goes to trial. And that's really where the actual cost of the money is, to take away the cost from the local authorities and ensure that the local authorities have got the backup. Because you're right, the local authorities are struggling, and I think it's really important that we need to support them as much as we possibly can.
So there is support for the local authorities for the legal side. Is there support for the other piece of work in finding out where the hidden buildings are? Yeah.
So another very good question. Again, it's a struggle we do have. When we've actually, again, Birmingham City, when I was there, I was involved in a really interesting piece of groundwork, which was sort of which is run by central government to see whether the data which is held on the government databases is actually reflective of those buildings which are on the ground. You would have thought a large building would be hard to or easy to find, wouldn't you? But surprisingly, there was a lot of indifference between the actual data on the government sites as opposed to the data on the ground. So we almost need our own staff to be on the ground, to walk those streets, to find the buildings, to sort of make sure it's accurate. And that's really important. So we have got money to do that. Again, it's limited, and it's not the money that we wanted from central government. not the money that I budgeted for, but we do have the staff, some staff, to be able to do some of that work. But certainly finding those missing buildings is crucial. It's an imperative part of this plan to make sure there's nobody missing. And surprisingly, or probably not surprisingly, the owners of these buildings don't want to be found. I think it's fair to say they have stalled the issue. They haven't come forward. We've dealt with all the buildings to date, which have registered themselves as a building with combustibles, but unsurprisingly, those accountable people, those ones who don't want to be found, are trying to sort of stall and try to sort of hide in the background. So we're really adamant we want to sort of find out who those people are and get those buildings onto the system, so we can start off the legal process to make sure that these people are held accountable for the products, those combustible products within their external wall systems.
Councillor Kettle, do you have a?
Just a little insight. In the real world, the numbers we're talking, I don't think, even 3 years, I don't think we've got a cat in hell's chance of complying to this dateline. And you can imagine, you come to 1929 and all of a sudden, an awful lot of buildings can't get a fire building safety certificate, whatever terminology they want to use. And these businesses do not comply with normal business usage. So where do we go from here? If they can't get insurance on a building, it doesn't comply with safety regulations, you've got a working business who thinks that can go on without doing anything, and all of a sudden the crunch time comes. Where do we go from there? Do they ask their employees to sign an indemnity before they go to school or before they go to work? Where do we go from here on the ground?
Well, it's a good question. Again, it's something central government need to answer. They seem to be very keen at the time, but as I said, we've received funding for 3 years, but that funding is being diminished over the 3 years, having a 20% cut on what we should be getting. But we can only do what we've been asked to do, and certainly, we are progressing each of those buildings. We've employed intelligence officers. We're doing lots of internal intelligence on those individual buildings to make sure we have the right people held accountable, and we're serving lots of notices to make sure. So we're using all the powers that we have available to us to make sure that they do the job. But Councillor, you're right. It takes them about 2 or 3 years to actually do the works from the point of us finding out about the problems to the point where the actual buildings are remediated. It takes a long time, but I think the key target we're trying to meet, as I mentioned earlier, is to ensure that each of those buildings is within the programme, is being actively engaged and being sort of progressed, and not just being left, but we're having compliance officers go back and check that they're actually doing the work. The issue with the issue with not having building safety certificates issued by Building Safety Control is you're right, it's an issue again, and it's something that they will only do at the point when that last new kind of product is put onto the external part of the building and it's been made safe. So that's coming a lot later down the line. But you're right, insurance costs are going up immensely, for the actual residents and the leaseholders who are working there. We've got lots of evidence of that, and again, it's another frustration that we sort of have that I think the central government should actually help us with.
I listening to you, I don't think you can possibly succeed in 3 years' time. And what I'm getting at is, I think you've been set up to fail. It's brutal, what I'm saying, but I think you cannot do the job in 3 years.
We've been really it's a possibility. We can't sort of not accept that, because it's always a possibility. But what we can do is progress as much as we can, and I think the amount of work we've done as a region has been immense over the last 2 years or so. So we're working through the buildings at speed. What might actually be helpful is we come back. This is our first time to this committee, and it might be useful to come back maybe in a year's time and give you some indication of where we are with progress. And I think that would be very helpful, Councillor. Then we can sort of show you what we are trying to achieve. But there's always a chance there is a failure, and I can't put my hands up and say that that's not possible, because it is. But all we can do is what we're trying to achieve, with the best of the funding and the sort of staff we have available to us.
Thank you for that. To me, this is a numbers game. The The further we get down it, the lower the risk. And so pushing on is the only option we've got, and you're going to be more robust about it. Councillor Walters.
Thank you. Now, did I miss it, or is there any funding available if they're private buildings? They're not going to build council buildings, they're going to be private buildings. Is there any funding from the government that's actually for the property owners to actually access, so as they can actually redo this cladding what's actually not fire resistant?
Yes, again, really good question. There is absolutely, yes, there is funding in place. So the central government has got about 5 kind of funding schemes out there, which the individual responsible parties have to apply for to get it. And again, a big part of what we do is to sort of engage with the accountable people, with the freeholders, with the managing agents, to find where those buildings are and encourage them to apply for it if they're not already aware of it. It's a win-win for a lot of these accountable people, because government is paying for the cost of remediation. So 5 schemes in place. The current one, which is very successful, is what we call the cladding safety scheme, and that's sort of been run by an arm of the Homes England, and that's working exceptionally well at speed and pace, and it seems to be working to what the needs of the actual industry is requiring. But at the same time, don't forget, the developers are also being pushed upon by central government to make sure that they also remediate their own buildings up to about 30 years old. Okay, so there's a number of programs which are out there, and of course we've got our region, which is trying to then enforce upon those buildings where it's very slow, where there's stalling, where there's some sort of blocker that's stopping them from sort of moving forward. And that's something that we're trying to encourage, you know, at the combined authority, working with our delivery partners, which are the sort of local authority enforcement teams, and the building safety regulator that's now coming online, and also the fire service, which I work very, very closely with.
Thank you. I think we need to move on. We're now 5 to 1, but I think in summary, we support your robust approach and the approach of helping people apply for grants in order to get it moving. And yes, I think the committee will recommend to next year's committee that they review this in a year.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, councillors.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Work programme. The draft programme is out there. I think we've added 3 things. Adult education into jobs review. I was specifically interested in it's a vocational course. Can you prove people are in a job 6 months later? We wanted the Connect to Work programme in September 27, i.e. not in this coming year, but in the following year. And this building remediation thing. I've got one additional thing, which you recall I had a complaint that came to me that this committee is not about complaint. Therefore, we could look at it. I then had a series of other emails from the same individual. There was one item within there which I think was what maybe falls within our remit, which was why are we spending money on couriers? Because 2 documents were couriered to this individual. Now, when I think back to my time in industry, couriers were used for 2 reasons. One is because you need to get it to them quickly. That is an awfully common occurrence. And the second issue is when you need to prove that it's actually got there.
It's security,
You can actually evidence, somebody can put their hand up and say, I delivered this on this day at this time, and here's a photograph to prove it. Frankly, Amazon does an awful lot of that these days anyway. I did ask questions about how much. It was 2 packages combined total of more than a bit over 400 quid. Frankly, I don't think it's worth our time investigating £400. And my view is that we do not put this into the work programme. I don't think postage is important enough.
Yeah.
Great, Chair.
Thank you.
Right, before we go, I would like to thank you on behalf of the committee for chairing the meetings and actually doing a fantastic job. You've led us, and you've actually done a lot of scrutiny yourself, which has actually been helpful to the officers, and you've done a fantastic job. Thank you.
Here.
The committee's job is going to get more important. My feeling from the leaders of the council is there's more delegated stuff going out to officers. They no longer scrutinise it as much as they would otherwise have done, which means that we will have to. But I think that's the way the world is going with the integrated settlement anyway. So this job is going to get more complex and more meaningful, I think, in actual fact. And I know officers in general terms appreciate the work that we do and the help that we actually give them. They don't see this as the Spanish Inquisition, they see it as helpful. And I'd like to thank all members for their contribution on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both.
And good luck with your elections if you're re-standing.
I'm going to try. Lindsay, is anybody coming in?